Okay, here we are live, March 8th, 2025. Infinite Plane Saturn Day. Although I think maybe I put a title here. Oh, yeah, Paul on the Ball, which I suppose deserves a bit of an explanation. Paul on the Ball and other shape traders. Now, obviously, we're being facetious here, but there is a point. When I say shape traders, the people who said that the Earth was flat and changed their minds like a couple weeks ago, they were flawed in the first place for even asserting a shape without having any evidentiary support other than a logical rejection of the establishment model. But agnosticism and skepticism aren't the same thing as jumping onto another model prematurely or accepting bad evidence. And in the case of, let's say, Robbie Davidson, for example, he was a big Bible Earth promoter. So how does he go from, hey, this is the irrefutable, undeniable Word of God, to God got it wrong, NASA's right? Like, it shouldn't be like this. I mean, they shouldn't come out saying, I was wrong. It's like, no, you were wrong to accept the model. You were wrong to presume you had enough information. But the way they're doing it, it makes it sound like they're actually going to the other side, which is why we're calling them shape traders. Joined by P. Trippa, McDirtywork, Penguinati Auto Hoaxer, KKIN, Diana South, Deprogram Truther, Watchdog, and Matt OX. So Paul on the Plane is the latest casualty of the final experiment, where a group of flat earthers and a couple gloobers, and by the way, the gloobers are smart, they know what they're talking about, however, they believe all the fake news, so you can just dismiss their opinions. But they went down to Antarctica and they burned a straw man, and they came back and were really proud of themselves, and then were a little angry when they found out nobody was impressed. Penguinati, do you think Derek Chauvin is? No, I've kept up with the Parkers. I've kept up with a lot of the Sandy Hookers, and they are a peculiar bunch. I believe that one of them, someone's asking if I think Derek Chauvin is repurposed. No, Derek Chauvin is Derek Chauvin. There are people who will look at a picture of somebody and notice it looks similar to somebody else. But if you think Derek Chauvin is Robbie Parker, it's not like it's racist, but you're generalizing their features. And you have to also look at videos, and you have to look at or listen to their voices. And then think about the logical sense it would even make. Is it even plausible or even fakeable? But it is a fact that a lot of these crisis actors move in the same actors guild, crisis actors guild, and they tend to get repurposed. I mean, we were just recently talking about Gabby Petito, and I have a deep dive, a 30-minute video breakdown of the Gabby Petito hoax and why I think it's a hoax. And a large part of this stems from the fact that she and her brothers were in a Sandy Hook music video called Irreplaceable. I would have called it unlistenable. But the fact that they came from that same group, it's the same production company. And if you look objectively at this Netflix special on Gabby Petito, it's a movie about a live streamer. It's not a live streamer's perspective. Totally phony. But Derek Chauvin got stabbed 22 times, which I think had some significance. This was at the same time. Wasn't he sentenced for like 22 years? But he was stabbed in prison a number of times. And was it Black Friday? There was some significance to that whole thing. I have to go back and look. But it was around the same time that a hockey player had his throat slashed on the hockey ring. And we were connecting these events because it was like hockey player number 22. And I think he was slashing. I have to go back and look. I don't want to go too far into the weeds here. But I do want to bring this up because we have been talking about history recently. Someone brought up mud flood, which is a ridiculous proposition on many levels. But I think it makes a lot of sense if you look at it metaphorically. Has our history been erased? Well, the fact of it is the power elite write our history every day through fake news, through totally controlled media. So they may as well be burning books. They are writing history as they go. How is that any different? It's not like we ever had an objective history that they're rewriting. No, they've been fictionalizing it this whole time. So this brought up the subject of, well, how far back can we go? How far back can we trust things? And this is where we get into retro auto hoaxing. So retro auto hoaxing refers to going back at previous events and looking at it with uh, educated, enlightened eyes in terms of what media is, the function it serves, and always has served. Because again, it's just a branch of government, and it's how they rule us. It really is mind war. And going back and looking at these things tends to show the same as if we're looking at the news today. Same terrible actors, same terrible writing, easy to see if you know what you're looking at. But it's not just good enough to call things out fake to the obvious, preaching to the choir. And I've been doing a lot of research and development with a number of AI applications. You know, everyone knows ChatGPT, but I've been checking out stuff like there's one in particular I've been into, Novel Crafter, which is just you kind of organize your ideas. And the more I've been looking into this, the more I've realized, wait a minute here. If I can program this thing with its codex, with the different characters, to write according to my my parameters for each character, then I can kind of guide it in its interpretation of what I put into it. And I've been realizing here it would be really simple to take old news stories and have them evaluated in a very automated way. So let's have an AI chatbot auto hoax everything in the past. Go through the news and with our new set of criteria and ask certain questions and say, well, there's enough information here to question it. There's enough reason to think it's fake because of this, this, and this. And we would clearly connect this with predictive programming examples, but we want a full documentation. We want the parallel media to have a paper trail of fakery going back decades. And we've tackled this before. I had a wiki on this, but coincidentally, we were overtaken by Russian bots. It was unusable, and it kind of got abandoned. But now that I'm looking at the way we can automate things, it's becoming increasingly plausible that we might actually have a way to take this on and to essentially do a skeptic's take on the 20th century and would categorize it: space fakery, mass shootings, serial killers, celebrity dramas, and patterns would emerge, as we often note here. But I'm talking about creating a large body of material that not only parallels what the public believes to be true, but just adds on to it. So this is like the additional information that you might want to know. Like a little, like it's almost like, you're watching these TV shows and it's like, this is just a dramatic recreation. It's like the public doesn't know how much of what they've experienced has just been drama. All right, let's see. Stephen Jackson, George Floyd proves they laugh in our faces. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I don't. What I'm focusing on here really is fake news deconstruction, and I think there's a lot of perhaps truth or bait or stuff that is just too far out of bounds for the public to even conceive of it, to bring it up, unless we can firmly identify and I guess prove it to be true. So, for example, we often talk about deep fakes and what isn't fakeable. Well, everything's essentially fakeable. It's just a matter of scale. But what I'm thinking here is, like, for example, there's a whole group of conspiracy theorists who believe that pandas are fake or all the presidents are women. Like, if you want to believe Donald Trump's a woman, that's on you. But you still need to explain what follows after that and what stems from this. So how did a 60-year-old Donald Trump give birth to Barron? Like, none of these things make sense. Who's the daddy? So these are like really shallow takes, and we're going for a very nuanced take. And so the idea that one actor could be repurposed for another actor is not new. We've seen this, I think, a lot in the entertainment industry. A lot of rappers are alleged to be not only not dead, but rapping in a different form. For example, there are many who believe that Tupac isn't dead and that he continued his career as a somewhat mediocre version of himself with dreads. I think his name was Kill the MC, which sounds like Kill the MC. And so when you look into this, it's like, well, okay, well, what else are they faking? What else is fakeable? Was Jimmy Carter really JFK with a different haircut? And a lot of these things have legs. So people have been suggesting, well, Stephen Jackson claimed that George Floyd was his twin, and that was really strange. And what is the basis for this? And so it's all really kind of crazy. I looked into that, but the reason I discount it is that there's a video of George Floyd, not safe for work video, that I think couldn't possibly be Stephen Jackson just based on the tattoos and based on a number of other things. And I think you could make the case George Floyd existed. There was somebody who suggested that he had died before 2020 and that he had taken part in some kind of police training video. There's a number of claims, but the fact of it is George Floyd did not die on Memorial Day 2020. And not only did he not die on that day, he didn't die from an overdose and he didn't die from police brutality. If anything, he was dead before, or he's out on some island with Derek Chauvin drinking Coronas. Like, these are all actors on the same team. And as we talked about before, and this was not really honed in on by the media for very long, but Derek Chauvin and George Floyd worked together at the same shady nightclub for years. And Chauvin was also a cop. His neighbors thought he was a real estate agent. I mean, come on. There's way too much there. Parma says cash cab Chauvin behind the Eskimo rent-a-cop. Yeah, a lot of people think he's the cash cab guy. Well, I mean, it could be, I guess. I don't see it. I don't see the practicality of it. But there are people who dispute whether it's the same guy in the mugshot as on the in the CCTV. And one thing I will say, and I noticed this with Derek Chauvin's mugshot and all his accomplices, their mugshots were like Hollywood studio mugshots. These weren't just line up against the wall, snap a photo. No, they had like reflections in the eyes. They created like a sort of a like this villainous demeanor, almost like the Kubrick stare. Like, it was pretty bad if you look at their mugshots. So that's all got to be fake as well. But there's more to it. Like, there's questions about the footage itself and the people involved in it. I believe even Telcom X, Sean King, might have had his hand in that. So everything's questionable. In my opinion, it was it was directed. I believe the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd psyop was directed by either Spike Lee or Jordan Peele. And now the Jordan Peele thing. Now, was Cash Cab a comedian? Because Jordan Peele's kind of in that realm. But I think it's a Spike Lee production. And one of the things I like to analyze here when it comes to these big events, and we'll get into this with our parallel media, is who directed what psyop? I think James Cameron had a hand in the LA riots and in the Cop City riots and 9/11. But in all likelihood, George Floyd was a real person who made some kind of a deal and we got a crisis acting gig. If you watch the entirety of the footage, he was saying, "I can't breathe," when he was in the back seat of the roomy SUV. He was already saying that. And I'm wondering, well, it's probably because he was a terrible actor. And there's no director on a live one-shot take like that with body cam footage to say, "No, George, wait until you're on the ground to say I can't breathe." So he started kind of early. That didn't make sense. But again, there's enough with the scripting, the predictive programming, the timing of it, the ritualistic significance of this event to question whether any of it is real in any sense. And no, the whole thing was a hoax and a psyop. In fact, the doll on the ground, at one point, George Floyd didn't have legs. And even in the back of the ambulance, that was a hyper-realistic simulation training dummy manufactured locally in the Twin Cities. There was a company called Seven Sigma. Their manufacturing plant was centered there, and it was one of the first things that the arsonists and looters burned. Why would they burn the factory that produces the simulation training dummies that you can intubate, that speak, that breathe, that look realistic, especially to the camera? Like, in person, they look realistic. But on film, they're foolproof. And so there's plenty there to suggest that, no, there's nothing about the story that was real. And again, Derek Chauvin, is he really in jail? You know what's interesting about this is Miles Mathis just put out a piece on the question of these various high-profile celebrity arrests. Like Sam Bankman turned 33 the other day in the same cell as P. Diddy. And I think they're also sharing a cell with the Prophet of Doom, Frank James, who fired 33 rounds into the subway, protesting the city's lack of care for the mentally ill, basically the Riddler. And then you had also R. Kelly. R. Kelly is hanging out with the Prophet of Doom, P. Diddy, and Sam Bankman. There's so much happening right now, but let's start at the top here. I don't know if I have it marked. I will get into it though. Miles Mathis has a article about fake prisons, so we'll talk about that. There's quite a lot. Let's just start with the topic here. Paul on the ball. Robbie Davidson, who did a 6-part documentary called The Globe Lie with Philip Stallings and Rob Skiba, and Philip Stallings, founder of the Biblical Flat Earth Society, is serving life in prison for abusing a ton of children on camera. But that Robbie Davidson, who is also the Flat Earth Conference organizer, who prevented a woman who was SA'd from calling the police because the person who did it, Jake Bird, worked for Jimmy Kimmel, who was secretly invited. This guy was secretly invited by Robbie Davidson. So anyway, that Robbie Davidson posted this. Paul on the plane, a speaker at a couple of my conferences, which also included a bunch of sex offender speakers, side note, and the creator of the popular series Space is Fake, had built a significant following on his YouTube channel. Yesterday, he briefly announced that he no longer holds the belief that the Earth is flat. Keep an eye out for his upcoming official statement. Well, he'll explain the reasons behind his change of view. So here's what Paul on the ball said. Paul on the plane. I'm hearing people don't think I exist anymore, let alone now that I'm a glober. I want to set the record straight. It can't be flat. I'll explain further when I get a chance to finalize my statement and articulate my rationale. But for now, this will have to do. Keep it round. God bless. Paul on the plane. Now, this is the same person who likely, with Robbie Davidson, professed that God made the earth flat because Satan would have made it a ball. This is a major turning point for the whole conversation, and it needed to happen. You shouldn't have a belief the earth is flat, nor should you have a belief the earth is a ball. You should know. There's enough information, or there should be. And if there isn't, or if it's being warped or augmented, then it needs to be rejected, and then you're left with a vacuum, a void, an I don't know. And that's where I'm at. I'm shape agnostic, and I'm borderline shape ambivalent. I almost don't care. But at this point, yeah, you can dismiss the belief. I foment a culture of disbelief, non-belief here. We are media non-believers. We know what we know. We don't need to take a leap of faith and trust the person isn't lying to us. And even if they aren't lying, they're lying. Somebody can be on TV telling you how the sky is blue. They're still lying if they're speaking from a network that presupposes a world view with everything that happened that they reported previously as being fundamentally true. There's no truth in this place. The only truth is outside of it, the off-world stage. And a literalist said, is triangulation on a bendy triangle possible? Oh, Paul on the plane is one of these individuals who I think has been in this circle of alternatively flat earth promoters, biblical flat earth promoters, and then pushing crypto coins like Axion. And I think Axion must have done very well, right? I haven't checked on it, but I remember they were promoting it a couple years ago. I'm assuming it did very well. I'm assuming everybody that invested in Robbie Davidson, Paul on the plane, and Patricia Steers crypto Axion, I'm sure they all are just rich right now, and they're hanging out on some island. And they're like, oh, look, there's Derek Chauvin and George Floyd having a Corona. Because, of course, they wouldn't be involved in anything shady. X322 says these government flat plants were always anti-penguin. Yeah, always. Always. I mean, how can you hate penguins? And they always hated us because we were not grabbing onto the whole Bible model. I said it's premature. If you have a model, you're assuming you have complete information, and that's a big assumption. And the alternative models were put there, I believe, to keep people in a state of being, I guess, married to a presupposition that they could take away later. And I'm like, no, I think we should maintain this area of objectivity. They're totally against it. The Bible Earth had no No real firm basis. And look, where is it now? Okay, so let's see what else we have here. We'll talk about the parallel. No, I had a weird series of, I don't know, it could be coincidences. So I'm not sure what it means, but I was driving somewhere and I'm turning into a parking lot and someone kind of cuts me off. Like I almost had to swerve to avoid this person. And driving through that parking lot, exiting, a pedestrian walks in front of me. The next place I go, someone parks really close, right up next to me, and she seems kind of like unhinged. So I squeeze the truck forward and I go straight and I go through the next lane out of the parking lot, and a car nearly backs into me. So then driving down the street, running across the street, a pedestrian runs in front of me. So then I'm kind of taking it slow. I'm driving back home down a back road, and a pizza delivery guy in a red car backs out into the street again in front of me. So I had five different instances that I was counting of being just annoyingly blocked. And sometimes these things happen to me, and I used to call it just matrixy behavior, like something's trying to tell me something. I'm not saying it's bad luck. I'm saying it's some kind of a sign. So what is the sign? I don't know. But I stopped and I actually parked so I could write it down and think about this for a minute. Not sure what it means, but I think it means you're going the wrong way or I'm doing something wrong. I'm not sure what it means, but I pay attention to these things. I think there's some kind of I guess, a feedback loop between our intention and what follows next. And I think that it's some sort of a interaction. Well, I think, see, the term is, I use synchronicity, but I don't believe synchronicity is the result of a higher power, as in like God or angels or something supernatural. I think it's actually just an aspect of our consciousness, and it's specifically that part of us that isn't filtered through the meat suit. So it's not bound by our senses, but it has access to other information outside time space as we experience it. And I think it, in some capacity, does have some co creative input. So there's that. So just letting you know, I'm doing something wrong or something. But anyway, moving on, we're going to talk about Paul on the plane. Now, I'm not against these individuals who are suddenly saying, "Oh, it's a ball." Like I don't care. But here's where I get to the point where I could say we don't have enough information for a complete model. The model we've been shown is all we have as far as information. Flat earthers have not expanded on that. No one's taken any trips except for Logan Paul, and that was a hoax. Nobody got behind any significant efforts. The best effort we had was we did have someone on our side going to an altitude, but that wasn't to check the flat Earth of almost 2,000 feet. Like honestly, Mad Mike was the only sincere effort to change the paradigm. He would have done something because his plan was to actually go to the Kármán line outside of the controlled opposition space agencies. But nobody's added to the information. So all we're left with is the ball. But is that complete? It's only complete if you believe that everything that extends beyond it is as reported. And if what we have been shown to be space is fake, then we cannot claim it to be a complete model. There's a vacuum of information. So whatever they're concealing behind fake space is necessary information for us to arrive at a complete model. So at this point, it's premature. Flat earthers and ball earthers are the same person. They're making the same mistake. They're operating on the same false premise that, oh, we have a complete model. No, you're both wrong. False dichotomy, the either or fallacy. It was always erroneous. I always said it was never about flat versus round or shape. It's always been an open or closed system. And what we have revealed here is that it is an open system. And they pretend it's closed because they've given us false parameters. But we have seen through. So for them to say that they didn't have a point is kind of like, that's where I'm kind of disagreeing with them. Like, no, you had a point to completely reject everything from the space agencies and from the general consensus about the big picture that we can't verify, and to say the final experiment in any way changes this thing just shows that they were wrong from the beginning to think they had a complete model. So again, I guess it's good they're admitting they're wrong. We don't have to, because we never supposed that we had a complete model. We never said we figured it out. What's up? This is where it's at. AutoSad, how you doing? Concavers have a working model. So concavers have a working model in the same way that the globe is a working model. Yeah, it works if you assume its parameters. But what I'm saying is what's outside of the concave Earth. So for those who don't know, concave Earth is not hollow in the usual sense of like inside of a ball in a heliocentric system, but concave Earth refers to everything that we see is within a like we're in like a womb of some kind. But what's outside? Infinite dirt. They just replace space with dirt. So if you have a concave earther who can explain to me what is outside of our area, our habitable space, if you can explain that, then you have a model. But if it's just infinite dirt, like in all directions or whatever, it's the same proposition as infinite space. And in fact, it has less explanatory power. Otto said, remember Lord Stephen Christ? Isn't he back in prison? Yeah, I wish. He's actually, he's in the concave Earth now. It's not as big as he thought it would be. It's just about 6 foot by 4 foot by 8 feet deep or whatever. But no, he's I don't know how big these graves are. He's fortunately passed. But he's like one of the first ones who made sense of the idea, and he built models to explain it. He was not a hollow earther. He was a concave earther. And yeah, he did go to jail for threatening to kill a couple presidents. First it was Obama, and then it was Trump. But, you know, he had problems, and I hope he's in a better place. Girl says, Trump made a reference to outer space at the climax of his speech, promising to take us further, and they have to double down on the legitimacy of Musk as the space pioneer. Plus, he's got Space Force. And Space Force has control of all military satellites. I mean, what does that tell you? That our entire military is there as a subset of the PSYOP entertainment complex. It's all fakery. The fakery is not a force multiplier. It's not a Machiavellian maneuver to fool the other side. No, the fakery is to fool the general populations. It's to fool the multitudes. The military are performance artists. And if you find that offensive, nukes are fake. I mean, if that doesn't shake up your entire perspective of what you're a part of, then nothing will. Like, you have to believe in these things to have any sort of a belief in any of it. And it's like, it's not unpatriotic, what I'm saying here. I was in the military, and I knew how, now looking back, yeah, I was brainwashed. I was in a closed system. In fact, the only reason I came across Alex Jones is there was an order passed down that we were not to listen to Alex Jones. So I went down to I left the base, I went to the El Paso main library, and I downloaded MP3s. I got a video at that time from ABC News that some reporter had climbed on the wall of the tomb at Yale and recorded a skull and bones ceremony, and I have not been able to find it since. There was some guy in a George Bush mask. There was somebody made to kiss a skull. I'm pretty sure there was a simulated death, but there was like this bit of footage. But my point being here is that when I was in that box, I didn't receive any information that would contradict it. And everything was super compartmentalized. The people that I knew couldn't tell me what they knew. And because what they knew was connected to certain air defense artillery system. And one of them told me something, and he put it like this. He said, our radars at White Sands are painting targets 100 miles away. Now, it's classified because we can only tell the media 65 miles. And I'm like, that's weird. He said, yes, we're painting targets over the curve of the Earth. And I think he was saying it with the belief that, yes, they're actually looking over the curve. All right, let's continue here. Yeah, Brother Ernest is a concaver. He could explain it. Brother Ernest was at the Exit the Matrix conference we had in Vegas, and he's good as far as printmakers go, as far as pretty much anything. I should probably connect with him. I'm not sure if he's still doing this stuff. I know he had some issues with the chemicals you're always working with, but in fact, I have some of his work over here. I'll bring it out. He made this glass plate with the penguin on it, with Fepe's face. Norbu says GPS satellites are real. I use them. Well, there's a few questions we could ask here. Like, okay, do you think that satellites are fakeable? And one of the points that I would make in this context is that um, Loon X makes that case that yeah, actually it is doable. It's already in use. In fact, there's a lot of information on this matter. If you haven't looked into stratospheric balloons, the ones that stay up for months at a time, everything that is purported to be coming from outer space could in fact be done locally, as in like stratosphere. It doesn't require high velocity orbiting satellites at 17,000 miles per hour, which I think is preposterous. It doesn't require that. But it's interesting to me that Loon X went out of business just as Starlink showed up. So Loon X was able to do everything Starlink claims to do. And as soon as they achieved this capability, they said, oh, this isn't economically feasible. We're closing our doors. So Loon X disappears and then Starlink shows up. What's the difference? And NASA's been involved with balloons for a long time. And it's not like they're faking it. They're actually doing, not everything NASA does is fake. You can pretty much trust everything they're doing below the Kármán line is pretty much real. It's beyond that where you have to really question it. Like Elon Musk is launching rockets. Rockets are real. Rockets do in fact land. I missed it because I was in school at the time, but when I was a kid, I remember my grandfather, retired general, was invited to White Sands to witness the very first reusable rocket. It was some kind of I have the story written down, noted somewhere in my bookmarks, but they were testing this idea of a rocket that launches and then it lands. And I saw the local news coverage of this thing. So like that technology is not purely like science fiction. Now the science fiction comes in when it's out of sight, out of mind. And where are they landing the rockets? I saw this meme today. I think it was posted by, I saw this in Gilded. Here it is. Kevin Mooring. Gulf of SpaceX debris. Like it could be. I mean, there is a lot of debris going on, but it could be that they're just dumping these things in the water and recovering them later. But Musk is, it's like half fake, half real. Does he know it's fake when it goes to space? Does he have the security clearance to know? It's a question. It's a valid question. And a literalist said, I had a dream a few days ago that there's a thick, dark smoke over Manhattan and fires everywhere. Then a huge, tall wave jumped over the city. Isn't there a wildfire right there, right now? Cygirl says, what happened to the Hollow Earth people? I used to hear more from them. Maybe they found it. Like, I might not come back. If I find the Hollow Earth, it might be the last you've heard of me. They probably have life extension and dinosaurs. I've read a few accounts. Was it Admiral Byrd, if you can trust that Mason who opened Masonic Lodge 777 in Antarctica? You know, the one reason why I think that the final experiment wasn't an easy sell is they didn't have any penguins. If those guys were hanging out with penguins, it would have been game over for Flat Earth, and it would have just, I don't know, it wouldn't have blunted the impact of the experiments. Cygirl says, there's only room for a few scams in the outer space swindle game. Well, okay, so that's a good point there, because it's a monopoly. There's a monopoly on space travel and space fakery. And recently, a private company, Firefly, sent that capsule to the moon, and they took a picture of the Earth. And I had brought this up years ago. In fact, the intro song that we play here, Saturn X, I'll play a short clip just to remind you, because this is pertinent here. I had come up with this idea, and you can see the logo here for Saturn 62, I said, let's start a fake space agency, do everything CGI. We will claim to be sending CubeSats into space, and nobody will be able to dispute it. Who are they to say that we didn't privately send a lunar lander? So this song, I'm going to take you to Saturn, is about Saturn X, and our whole pitch was we're going to invent space steading. It's like seasteading, but we're going to park our ships on the rings of Saturn, and then eventually we're going to go there. Autosad says, I never trusted the Garden of Eden is in the North Pole. Oh, you think it's the North Pole? What do you think about Mount Meru, or the 33-mile circumference magnetic rock at the center of it all, according to Mercator? Gerardus Mercator. You know, if you don't believe that, then why do you believe the Mercator projection globe? He was writing his BFF, John Dee, not an insignificant figure in history. He coined the phrase British Empire, the original 007 spy for the Queen, astrologer. He invented Enochian magic, the basis for a lot of Western occultic ritual. So this individual claimed, well, rather, Mercator claimed to him in this correspondence that at the center of the North Pole is a 33-mile circumference black rock. Some believe it used to be a tree, like in James Cameron's movies, Avatar. You know, big giant. I mean, I'm sure you've all noticed that a lot of mountains happen to look like tree stumps. It's just a coincidence, you know. You know, I think there's more to giant trees than mud flood, but it's kind of part of the same package. The idea here is that we've been given a very distorted view of our natural history, and that what we believe are mountains are actually the remnants of trees that reached miles into the sky. And that some thing happened, or some group came along and tore it all down and enslaved mankind and harvested resources. The Grand Canyon is likely evidence of some kind of mining operation. I mean, it's a pretty dismal story because it suggests that we're living in the aftermath of something terrible. But it might be true. I mean, it is true anyway, if you think about, you know, history and how most of every species didn't make it. I pretty much were an anomaly to even be here if you believe the official story, which I kind of don't. Again, I'm kind of leaning these days towards biocentricity and panpsychism in a Disney universe on Planet Netflix. Joined here by Thirst for Truth, Clockwork 113. Pignub says the final experiment, no, the first observation. There's some dispute as to whether or not you could call that an experiment. I think you can if the experiment was specifically to debunk the AE model. And so in that sense, yes. Autosad says, John Dee was a major player in the occult game, no doubt. The Little Season theory is wild. You know, recently I did some research into John Dee because I came across how, who is it now? Somebody's buying the James Bond franchise. Oh, that's right. Amazon. And I was thinking about this because, you know, Amazon and Bezos, and there's this character, Dr. Evil, who's based off of a James Bond character. But also, we've noticed many interesting parallels between Bezos and this same character. So we're looking into this stuff, and it turns out that in one of these old James Bond movies, the bad guy was actually literally based on Aleister Crowley. And so Aleister Crowley is the one who really took all of John Dee's magic and put it into a system. So John Dee's Enochian magic, the term was actually, I think, coined by Crowley, but he repurposed it and turned it into their main ritual structure. But anyway, there's some interesting connections if you look into the occult side of the major secret societies, John Dee, and then some of these pop culture figures like James Bond, Dr. Evil, and then, of course, the overlap between the entertainment characters and real world characters like Jeff Bezos. You know, Jeff Bezos is not just a figurehead of a company and the CEO, but I think There's a certain archetype he embodies. And I think that on the world stage, he symbolically represents Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel. And there's a lot of substance to this when I say this stuff. Like, for example, look up the Amazon Helix headquarters in Virginia and how it's been compared to the Tower of Babel. These are not coincidences, nor is it a coincidence that Dr. Evil's base is in a space needle, because a space needle is another symbol of what? It's a UFO on a tractor beam, but it actually represents ascension, man going into space, a space needle like a rocket, which is all connected to the idea of the Tower of Babel story of man going up into the heavens. Tom Smith says, would you go on the Crow 777 podcast? Yes. Yes, Crow 777 is, I give him a little bit of, sometimes I'm a little critical of some of Crow's takes on certain things, but his research is great. And I used to listen to their podcast a lot because they research these strange characters like John Dee. He's done some good work on Jack Parsons and the Babylon working and all that stuff. I think our main point of disagreement is chemtrails. But I guess when it comes down to it, my take on it is that if someone doesn't agree with me on everything, it doesn't really matter. I just like to kind of elucidate the points of our disagreement and understand why we disagree. Harmon Walker became a member, picked up a titanium blue wrench. Has that new wrench smell. Thank you for supporting the channel. Norba says, Bezos was an accountant, I think. He figured out Amazon via accounting logic. Sure, but I think he's a world stage character. You don't get to become the richest man in the world and not be a part of the big show. And I think that his whole story ties into the man who fell to earth. So the story of man who fell to earth is this alien from a dying planet because of climate change, comes down to earth and he lands in New Mexico, played by David Bowie. Now this is revisited later with Starman going back into space as an effigy of David Bowie, because Starman is a character out of a David Bowie album. The song is called 5 Years, where it prophesizes mankind's savior. But Bezos's character, his persona, overlaps, even with the origin story of landing in New Mexico, forming the world's biggest corporation and trying to get back to space, get to Mars or wherever. And there's some other aspects to Bezos as well. I talk about the Dr. Evil comparison, the laughter. Even Fox News mocked Bezos's rockets and it's kind of funny. At the same time, the company Blue Origin, Blue Oregon, we were calling it that because its rocket was so obvious that Fox News was making fun of it, comparing it to Dr. Evil's rocket, which is clearly a dong rocket. So this is some kind of inside joke. They're laughing at it at its surface value, but no, we're actually looking at a religious paradigm that essentially worships the sun and the generative principles in nature and the masculine principle as the obelisk, which has been repurposed today as the rocket. But anyway, these are very complex characters. Bezos, again, I have a number of stories. Like, for example, Bezos, we talk about Musk and how he always inculcates the number 42 into everything. Well, Bezos bought a $42 million clock, put it inside the Sierra Diablo Mountains. Now, the opening of it was attended by some interesting characters like Stuart Brand from the Whole Earth catalog, these weird individuals, this weird ceremony. But the whole thing is, what's the significance of a $42 million clock? Well, it ties into the significance of the number 42 to Saturn, to time and space control, and Kronos is another version of Saturn. And so the clock has a great deal of significance here. But the high priests of the space program, it's all about Saturn. It's all about the number 42 as it connects in the symbolism or the symbol of the X. NASA sending the Saturn rocket to the moon. What is this Saturn thing? It's Osiris. It's sun worship. It's all worship of their god. That's what the rocket symbol ultimately is. So you have these individuals like Tucker Carlson and others, or Fox News, laughing at Bezos's rocket and these comparisons. Well, that's a very exoteric take. And even more specifically, the capsule has occult significance. Look at the capsule. You can look at it as the triangle with the eye in it, descending upon the pyramid. It represents the pharaohic elite, the golden tip of the obelisk. Anyway, let's continue here. Jay Nelson says Crow went from amateur astronomer to occult expert in 6 months. Well, he's the lunar wave guy. I don't think he would have me on his show, to be honest. I don't know. Would he? Have I burned any bridge? I don't like to burn bridges, but sometimes telling the truth will do this, or sometimes disagreeing with people, and how someone takes disagreement kind of determines this. Like if somebody doesn't agree with me, I'll still go on their show. I don't care. But if we disagree with chemtrails and that's a deal breaker, then I guess it's not going to happen. I hope we can overlook this. I would like to sincerely ask him some questions. Like, for example, when you say that boiling vinegar turns the sky blue, clears away the cirrus clouds, like when you say this, are you open to other possibilities? Because there are people who pray away the chemtrails. And I want to kind of dig here and see if he's open to the possibility that they would have gone away anyway, even if he didn't boil the vinegar. Because this is a logical fallacy known as faulty causality. And if you can recognize a logical fallacy and change your opinion about something, change your understanding of something, and recognize you were wrong, then you're a grown-up. If you can't, and if you continue to insist on the absurdity that boiling vinegar gets rid of chemtrails, which don't even exist, that boiling vinegar would get rid of cirrus clouds, which is what they are, then you're essentially being very immature about it. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's a deal breaker. I wouldn't even bring up the bizarro conversation he had with Owen Benjamin about CEs, nor am I going to explain to you what a CE is. Joe Santo says, Jackie Robinson was number 42, so every baseball season, every player wears 42 one day in the whole league. Well, let's go back to summer of 2020. George Floyd, his twin, Steven Jackson, was 42 at the time. The driver of his van, Maurice Hill, the drug dealer, the guy who gave him the fentanyl, was 42. We were looking at all these 42s that were attached to this event because 42s are always associated with civil rights and race war psyops. Jackie Robinson crossed the MLB color line, number 42. Rosa Parks, 42-year-old, when she achieved notoriety. But the summer of 2020, you had Chadwick Boseman, who was 42. He played Mr. 42. He raised $4.2 million for COVID relief. His project 42. And then what happened? He died. So when he died, MLB were all wearing 42s. Now this gets even weirder because they had delayed their usual Jackie Robinson week, which is in April. They delayed it until the summer because of COVID. So when they're actually doing it, Chadwick Boseman is dead. So that kind of lines up. And then at the same time, the NBA at that time were celebrating Mamba Week because it was the 42nd posthumous birthday of, well, it was the 42nd birthday, now posthumous, of Kobe Bryant. He turned 42. So you had Mamba Week and Jackie Robinson Week and the 42 thing all at the same time. Now, this also correlated with a lot of other stuff at this time, but I'm just saying that, yeah, this is code. And at the time we were noticing here the consistency of it all. The number 42, the number 33, with these various events. Okay, I'll open up phones here in just a moment. Okay, going through your comments. Joined here by somebody from Kick. I think Kick is all bots. Yeah, Norvis is 42 black. So that's a good question. I would say 42 is associated with Saturn. And every planet has a color association, a metal, and other things. So for example, Mars, red, iron, Venus, green, copper, Saturn, black. Sun, Saturn is lead. So Saturn is associated with black, but it's lead. So you have Saturn is associated with death and the kingdom, the earth, the material realm, matter. And then light is associated with the sun and gold or white. And so you have the black and white, sun and Saturn. I think these are the polarity, the duality, and it's what they represent. Because the 42 is associated also with gravity, and of course the earth, gravel, the grave. It's this idea of down and falling. Whereas the number 33 is consistently associated with ascension, immolation, transformation, things burning, disappearing into the ether, essentially. The resurrection of Christ at 33, 33 vertebrae in the spine represent the ascension of consciousness. It's Mach 33 to leave the earth. 33 consistently associated again with ascension, and 42 falling. So I think it's up, down, ascension, falling, dark, light, positive, negative. It's not about race. It's about duality and Hegelian dialectics manipulation, and then it has certain other occultic meanings. But and additionally, if you look at the symbol of Saturn, as far as like the old astrological symbols, you have like what appears to be a cross and a 2. Well, the cross is the 4. If you look at the origin of these numbers, and they all have letters, numbers, it's interesting to see the origin of these things and how there's something of a relationship between the shape and its meaning, especially with like runes, for example. But specifically, the 4 and the cross has always been associated with the sun, the 4 seasons. And we talk about this a lot, how it's encoded into so many things, like playing cards, 4 suits, 4 seasons, 52 cards, 52 weeks. And it goes into deeper nuance. You add up all the pips, all the numbers, you get 365. So 4 is associated with, again, the sun. And then the symbol of Saturn, though, the god of Saturn, it's the god of the harvest, the reaper, death, what happens at the end of the year, but the end of a cycle. And so I think what we're seeing here with the symbol of Saturn and the number 42 is that if you combine the 4 and the 2, you get the sigil of Saturn. And I think the meaning of it is a combination of the solar symbol of the cross, and 2 has to represent the scythe, the cutting, the splitting in two, the harvest. So I think the reaper, like the reaper or Father Time have. So the association of time and death is an obvious thing. Let's see here. Let's continue. Yeah, Wikipedia says he was 43 when he died. I don't know if you know this. Like, we were following this at the time because we were talking about all these things at the time. Because when Chadwick Boseman died, he had been recently playing Black Panther. So, what preceded BLM? The Black Panthers. We're talking about like what's a parallel movement? It's a continuous movement. It's just a rebranding. So, like for example, Emmett Till, civil rights. Then you have Trayvon Martin and BLM. So we were talking about the significance of all of this summer, or that summer of 2020, and Mr. 42, and how he's Black Panther. And when he died, there were children across the country who were burying their Black Panther dolls in the backyard, so putting them in a grave. And this all ties into the symbol of Saturn, who also, you could say, Moloch, Osiris, Moloch, Saturn. These are all, if you look at syncretism, it's just comparative mythology and symbolism. It's the same entity. So MLK's 57th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech was being commemorated that summer at the big obelisk, the Washington Monument, which is, again, a symbol of Osiris. So we're looking at this BLM gathering here at this MLK dressed in black, and it says Rip King is a hashtag. Rip King for MLK. But I think it's also a reference to Rip King as in Osiris, the dead Sun King, this mythical character that's the basis for all these different stories. But at the same time that you had the hashtag Rip King, there was also a competing hashtag because of Chadwick Boseman's death. So was it Rip Black Panther, Rip King, overlapping with the death of Martin Luther King? So you have Martin Luther King, Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, Mr. 42, and it's all kind of lining up at the same time. And as we're talking about this and discussing the significance of the death of Mr. 42, suddenly his death date was being changed to 43. Myself and I was going to say Joseph Green. Who's the Gematria guy? was just talking about how it seems like they're changing the name. I mean, the age by 1 year. Like they bumped it. So are they bumping the year because we're calling it out? And so yeah, he went from being 42 to 43. I'm saying they ministry of truth did it. It was a ministry of truth movement. MLK's death was 1968. His death was in 1968. And I think what was also significant about that, I think it was on 4/4. The assassination was April 4th, 1968. Trump was arrested on 4/4, 2023, which was the 55th anniversary. And what's interesting about that is 4/4 was also the death date of, I mean, sorry, the birth date of Heath Ledger, from Joker. And while Trump was on trial, Joker 2 was being filmed outside, and people thought the mob was gathered there for Trump. But anyway, so 1968 and 2020, this is another reason why it was significant to us. Everything that we were looking at in 2020's summer was borrowed out of 68. This is when I coined the term metascript with regard to analyzing media, because it seemed to be that entire news cycles were being repackaged, recycled. Entire characters and themes were being borrowed and brought back again with specificity. So, for example, 1968 is the year that the term coronavirus was actually coined. And there were many things that were happening civil rights wise that were being repeated. Even the phrase that Trump used, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Trump said this. Well, that was actually from some segregationist, 1967, 1968. It was like one of their expressions. So they were actually bringing back a lot of the late 60s to 2020. And I started noticing these patterns. And as soon as I started noticing it and commenting on it, we started noticing the mainstream media was actually kind of being self-conscious about these things and themes that were repeating. So it was like, I think Nancy Pelosi called it the summer of love. It's kind of funny. And after she said this, there was an incident where, probably fake, where two BLM protesters were dancing in the street and they got hit by a car. One's name was Summer, one's name was Love. I don't know if you remember this. We were talking about it's like the death of the summer of love. It was just so perfectly packaged. But 1969, I said, okay, look, if we're right about this, if this is beyond coincidence, if they are repackaging entire news cycles for generational psyops, like maybe, I don't think it's just about being uncreative. I think they're retelling the same myths in many ways. But if they're doing this again, then this should be a continuing pattern. So into 2021, I was looking at 2021 with the idea that this is going to mirror 1969 in many significant ways. And in many significant ways, it actually did. For example, on the anniversary of Apollo 11, Jeff Bezos launched to space at 9:11 a.m., incidentally. But the significance here, I guess it just seems like I think it all ties in. We talk about time and space and the clock and Kronos and Saturn. I think it all ties into the fact that beneath the surface of news, it's ultimately the same old astrotheological tale. I think we're looking at a lot of subtext here, and they're telling the same stories in many ways. And I think a lot of it's borrowed, obviously, from the Bible and possibly older stories. I mean, what isn't borrowed? They're recycling everything, even the news. Diana Sal says, Mayor Daley of Chicago, 1968, told cops to shoot to kill all arsonists. And we're just scratching the surface. The overlapping between 1968 and 2020 is the subject of a book I put out called Metascript Decoded. In fact, I'm a beta tester on Amazon for this new program they have with AI narrators. So if you have an ebook, they'll have an AI narrator will read it. It takes 5 seconds. You don't have to wait months for somebody to record it. And it's getting better. So Metascript Decoded is available as an audiobook if you want to listen to it. And I think I combine a lot of ideas in there to kind of put together the big picture. And I need to rewrite it or do a second edition because that was before we really came across newsbenders. and the real point to it all. Because we're still kind of like here looking at this additional information, but without a complete picture. But I think right now we can argue that we have a model. We have so the mainstream worldview, the worldview that people share, the consensus version of things that they download from the TV, from the broadcast media, that is a model that people operate within. It's like the Truman Show in your mind. And this model is wrongfully presumed to be complete. It's like the globe. I mean, is it a complete model? Can you swear on it? I would say no, it's not complete. Is the mainstream media telling you the whole truth? Well, obviously, no. Alternative media pretends to be filling in the gaps. That way, they can kind of have like a total monopoly on worldview itself. But it turns out alternative media is a subset of mainstream. It's actually part of the same closed system. But it's part of the same model. Alternative media is part of the same model as mainstream media. It's the same box. Our model is not constrained by their parameters. It includes psyops, fake news, and news bending, and an understanding of the purpose of fake news. And I call it the off-world stage perspective. So it's just more inclusive of additional information. And it leaves us with a lot of questions that are unanswered, but these are questions that the people in the box don't even know have been raised. And they're valid questions. But one of the main things that we have come across here that we have discerned is not only the purpose of predictive programming and concurrent programming and the entrainment between entertainment and news, but the purpose of fake news. The purpose of fake news has always been the scripting of history, because every fake news story aggregates and it never gets challenged. If you challenge it, you get in trouble, you get censored, you can't talk about the fake news because once it's carved in stone, it's sacred. It's settled journalism. So now we have the Holy Scriptures going back decades that tell us how everything happened. That's their main power. They control time and space, geography. They control our worldview. They control everything. But primarily they do it through lies day by day that are unchallengeable. And it's only a small percentage of the news that has to be fake. So I'm not here saying it's all fake. That was an old straw man. People say, you guys say everything's fake. No, you say everything's real. That's the problem. The problem is those of you who think everything's real. The real thing that we're bringing forth here is that the small percentage of what is faked is the focal point for everything else. So all the real news is bending itself. It's being bent. It's being influenced. It's being warped. That's why I say that there is no truth here. You can be truthy. You can have a pure heart. But the instant you start reading from that teleprompter, you're co-signing on a ton of fakery. So the purpose of fake news is worldview warfare and control, which they have successfully executed. Everybody's subsumed into the system. There are no real Neos in this matrix. Alex Jones is not a Neo. The QAnon shaman's not a Neo. The QAnoners out there on Q Street, with the Mentonol lean, they've given their minds over to something. They've outsourced a large part of their worldview building to nefarious characters. So I'm putting together some posters. I've already designed these before. I put one of them in the tabloid, but I'm going to also sell these posters separate. I have a diagram, and it has a box. It says MSM, World of the Programmed. Within the box, you have MSM Plus, which is Trutherville and Woketown. Woketown is on the left, Trutherville is on the right, but both are in the box. And the box is the programmed. There are no unprogrammed because you're born in it. There are only the deprogrammed, and that's only us. I mean, if you could find any deprogrammed outside of the IPS think tank, outside of the fakeologists or JLB, we have some overlap, point them out. Let us know, where's the enclave of people who figured out the purpose of fake news, predictive programming, and how news bending works and what its purpose is and the scale of it, the monolithic nature of it. Norba says, what's your knee-jerk reaction to the phrase revisionist history? Exactly. Racist. They say it's racist. Revisionist history is something that is almost entirely ascribed to white nationalists who challenge the Holocaust narratives. And I have nothing to do with them. Because if you call one thing fake, but you think everything else is real, your perspective is worthless. And some people want to believe some things to be real and other things to be fake so that they can manipulate it. Like some people say, oh, this group did 9/11, so I hate them. You don't know who did 9/11. And you don't even know what 9/11 was. And you're getting mad over nothing because nobody died. Elford says, auto hoaxers unite. Yes, auto hoaxers of the world unite. That's what we're doing here. Now, I'm not going to Trutherville trying to wake them up. I'm not trying to get them clean. Like, let's have a QAnon anon meeting here, 12-step program, and get them out. Like, that's not my intention here. The wokesters are unwakeable. They're so deep. They're married to the system. They're totally aligned with it, their values and everything. So you don't need pose on the left. The normies are unreachable and they're at peace. Let them have their bliss and let them marinate in their apathy if they can sleep with that. Like, honestly, the woke and the truthers are on a higher moral plane than the normies who don't care. But they're just wrong. They're misdirected. So I have nothing against them. Good for them for waking up. Bad for them for only half waking up. The way that we will be advancing here on forward is simply aggregating those who have already stepped outside of the box of their own volition. And it's not hard to find. It's not hard to notice when it happens. You will find your way here. Especially as we intensify the signal. And one of the things I'm working on right now to intensify the signal is the publishing wing. And I've been doing a lot of research and development and work with AI and these various GPTs. I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way to compete. Because what we don't have is we don't have the numbers. Deprogrammed Truther says it's literally just us, Tim. The others kind of get it. Well, I know it's just human nature and habit and tradition, but we had to really fight to get the phrase false flag eradicated from our lexicon. Because this is mind war, and ultimately it's a war of words and information and memes. And they have planted memes to guardrail our thoughts. If your frame, if your, whenever you look at any big news event, if your frame of reference is, I live in a world where false flags happen. So like a van runs over 33 people at a birthday party, and the guy's screaming Allah Akbar. What's your interpretation? The normie says terrorism. The left wing will say terrorism, but justified because of American military interventionism. And then the alternative media will say MK Ultra mind-controlled assassin sent by the deep state to grow the military-industrial complex. So they all have their interpretations over the event, about why it was done, who did it, who really did it. But whether you're left or right, truthy or a truther or a normie, you're not disputing that 33 kids got splattered. And that, to me, defines truthers. They're always just in the game with the mainstream with a different interpretation. So you have the pro-mainstream and the anti-mainstream. That's why I say you have to be anti-pro, anti-anti, which is where we're at. Anti-anti. If you're not anti-anti, then you're still playing according to their rules. Because the third perspective is, did it even happen? And you could say that, so to say that it happened, but somebody else did it is false flag theory. We had to get rid of false flag theory. False flag theory is just a way for them to shoehorn in mainstream agendas by making it palatable for the people who don't trust mainstream. So we've had to change our lexicon. We've had to define our terms, I think, a lot clearer than how they're thrown around. Like the term false flag needs to be understood and rejected because it's not right. And if you use these incorrect terms, if you start with the wrong premise that people died, well, that has all kinds of implications. It means, one, the media is not lying, or it's only lying partially. It means that this, well, it has so many implications that it's like, you take one false premise, and there's just a whole cluster of things that come attached to it, and so you have to eradicate that. But there's no point in trying to debate with true believers because their belief is coming from a place of emotion and conformity. It has nothing to do with facts or objectivity. There isn't really any objectivity in Trutherville, in Woketown, much less Normieville. You might even say that the IPS represents the only objectivist think tank on Earth. And that sounds like a tall claim because there's millions of self-identified objectivists, I'm sure. But the problem with objectivism is that it has always filtered its worldview and its philosophy through the media. It's always treated everything that we see in the news and all the history books as authentically real. So they don't really have any objectivity to speak of. It's like a relative objectivism. It's not truly objectivism. They sure loved the space program. Ayn Rand's people, they wrote about it like the space program was the ultimate testament to capitalism and the intellect. It's like, no, that represented a betrayal of the intellect and a subversion of our perceptions. It destroyed our psychoepistemology, which is what objectivism was supposed to fix. But they bought into a mystical paradigm. I mean, Ayn Rand was against mysticism, and she saw it as the main issue, the main problem, belief and the various religious paradigms that take away the intellect. And yet her philosophic system, by conforming to the world and its media, its interpretations, actually lost all claim to objectivity. So there's us. Yes, we're a very small group. But it doesn't mean there are a few of us. And beyond that, I think we represent an untapped market. I don't have a number on it, but I have some ideas and I have a vision for this thing moving forward. And I think that the numbers are far underrepresented because there hasn't been any way to consolidate or codify this until now. But I think it has growth potential. And I don't think someone goes full-blown media skeptic and then somehow goes back. Like it's a one-way trip. Another way to look at it, mainstreamers sit there with their nose pressed up against the screen and everything else is secondary. So they primarily exist in the mental Truman Show. Alternative media types and the wokesters are in the screen, through the screen, in the box. They have no objective reference point anymore. So their starting point for objectivity is mainstream, and they go deeper, deeper into the mind control. The auto-hoaxers are socially distanced from the screen. We're at least 6 feet away from it. And behind the screen, we can see there's a real world. And behind the screen, we can see all the things they don't want the people who are pressed up against it to see. We're not in their box. So this is it's an intellectual revolt. You could also describe this as a philosophical endeavor. It's technically kind of a disruptor. It should be revolutionary, to be honest. If you think about the implications of, let's just say 10,000 people realizing how monolithically fake media is and how centralized it is, and deciding voluntarily to associate on this premise and rebuild a version of the world by re-examining things and building a community based on this, it would become uncontrollable, unlike most conspiracy theories that that people organize around. Like the ufologists never got any answers. Why? Because they've always been mystified. Conspiracy theorists have never been able to organize effectively. The best you have are the anti-vaxxers, but that's just partisan politics. It was always just partisan. They never had a chance of getting anywhere because it was just manipulation. But there's no organizing against media from within. Alt media cannot win. They're part of the program. But what happens if enough of us break away and form a third branch of media? Well, it can happen. And the thing is, it's a one-way thing. I don't think that you see through psyops and suddenly you believe again. That's why the final experiment crowd is just kind of perplexing to me. It's almost like they didn't believe in the first place what they claimed to believe. Alfred says South Pole animation was good. Looking forward to the next. Yes, I plan number two. The main theme is going to be space junk. Space junk. And if you want to participate, door's still open on that one. Copaesthetic has arrived with 5 titanium blue wrenches. Haley Harmon, Sink Lloyd, Rome, McDirtywork, Friendly Ghost, and let's see who else. Have all received the blue wrench. Autosad says, believe it or not, phonetics had an impact on how we interact with reality. Well, the words matter for a lot of reasons, and I think that the words that we've been given are, and the framework we're given in the conspiracy theory circles is designed to turn you into an activist. It's designed to turn you into an info warrior, to fight the system, to think that you can wake people up when all you're doing is you're recruiting them to your side of the political horseshoe. Erica Creech says, if I hear, I miss when the news was objective, like when Walter Cronkite was around. One more time. Yeah, that's another thing too. People didn't just start this. I remember after the, I guess it was Sandy or Boston bombing. A lot of truthers were saying stuff like, "Oh, there's some good guys who want us to know. Oh, the reason they're so terrible is that they're trying to tell us." Right? Okay. They're trying to tell the people who can see through the fakery that yes, you have a point. It's fake. Like there's some kind of a wink or a nod. And their suggestion was that they just kind of took over the media and now there's all this fakery and anyway, just coping mechanisms. It's like, no, just face up to the fact that we've always been lied to and you're not in the know and you're not meant to be and nobody's on your side. It's always been fake. It's always been, media has always been an extension of religion. And religion has always been a tool of the elite to keep the masses in a state of relative darkness and therefore controllable. We're still in a dark age. Ted Stryker says, be sure to use an old toaster for space junk. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I am introducing the Dino Belt. I've talked about the Dino Belt quite a lot. You know, I sometimes pray for the spacemen and astronaut women in this ISS because according to science, there are dinosaur bones on the moon that went into orbit 66 million years ago when a 33-mile wide rock hit the Earth. And it caused a lot of biomatter, ocean, and presumably a lot of dinosaurs to spray into space. So Earth was like a super soaker, and it sprayed into space and on the face of the moon. So apparently the moon is covered in dinosaur bones. But between the Earth and the moon, it's reasonable to presume that there are dinosaur bones, which I think at this point would have formed into a dino belt. And my worry is that at some point, a T-Rex skull, a Triceratops skull could puncture one of the modules. It could bust right through the cupola, impaling Don Petit against the wall. So I thought, well, let's incorporate this idea of dinosaur bones in space. Mazel says, I watched a show called Dead Like Me. The main character was killed by a toilet that fell from space. Didn't they put a $23 million toilet in the ISS? The ISS is gross. Oh, by the way, I've been pointing out that it's always been inconsistent to me how they maintain a certain level of hygiene. Their clothes are always starched. Their hair is always cut. They're always shaved, eyebrows plucked, sometimes makeup, sometimes Botox. I'm always wondering, how do they look so good? And how do they look so well fed off of the garbage they have to eat? And they're up there for so many months. They don't look like they're camping. They don't look like they've been spending time at some isolated outpost. Like you see these experiments, these Mars experiments where they put people out in Siberia, like in some dome for 9 months or a few years, and then they bring them back later. These astronauts do not look like they're in some isolated outpost when it is like the most isolated place you could possibly be. They look like they're in like they got like a trailer. They got craft services. They're eating well. But I've always wondered about the shaving in space. Like how many razors are they going through? What's with all little bits of hair floating around? Like how is that happening? No running water? None of it made sense. And they're always so clean shaven. But Butch and Sunny have been stranded in space for almost 9 months, which might have some significance because they're about to come down. So they've been up there for 9 months, and in the last month, Butch has grown out his beard, and he's looking like Castaway, like Tom Hanks. I'm waiting to see if they have some kind of a volleyball with a bloody handprint on it that they're kicking around. But the guy grew a beard out. They've never had beards in space. First time. And it's all PR. Why else would he grow his beard? He just got sick of being up there. He's like, screw it, I'm not shaving anymore. No, no, it's all theater. Mazel says, after being hit on the head by a toilet seat that fell from the Mir space station, a young temp clerk became a grim reaper in death. Okay. Well, space junk has become increasingly a thing on the world stage. In fact, if you've been listening to Infinite Plane Radio, then you were expecting this. And I already made the correlation 2 years ago that you're going to see an uptick in space junk from Musk to correlate with mind junk from Musk, on the basis that the space program has always been about worldview warfare, worldview control. The space program has always been about the space between your ears, mind war. And when Elon Musk took over Twitter, I said this X thing is about disease X. It's about mind viruses. It's about flooding cyberspace, a commons globally, with ideas that are so bad that the global commons says we must censor. And I said similarly, this billionaire individual destroying entire global systems is going to be blamed for destroying low Earth orbit with all of his CubeSats. He's putting 42,000 CubeSats into space. And that these CubeSats are there for what? Meme proliferation. So he can spread his hate speech. So you can kind of see the problem here. And I said, yeah, we're going to see an uptick in space junk from Musk, etc. Well, look at this. FAA halts flights after Elon Musk's Starship rocket explodes and rains down debris. Like, this is a recurring story now. Yeah, Musk, well, he's not president and a literalist, but he is the fourth branch of government now, apparently. NASA astronauts left in space for 9 months. Name and shame who's blamed for leaving them stranded. And Musk wants to bring them down. This is posted by Violet McVeigh. There's a movie coming out on March 21st, so in a couple weeks. Comes out March 21st. So McVeigh, again, he was executed. How old was McVeigh when he was executed? Slips my mind for some reason. Same age that Dave Koresh was when he was incinerated. Same age of the guy with the USA shirt who set himself on fire at the ellipse in front of the White House 33 years after a 33-year-old did it in 1986. Oh, that's right. McVeigh was 33. Same age that Martin Luther was when he nailed the 95 Theses to the door. Same age as Jesus. Same age as Charles Manson. This number. The QAnon shaman was 33 when he ran to the Capitol with a spear and caused the insurrection. Like, I've been saying for some time, we need to quarantine the 33-year-olds, just lock them up for the good of society and for their own good. Okay, continuing here. This might have some significance. Somebody pointed this out to me because of the connection with the Odyssey. So, okay, Space Odyssey 2001, Stanley Kubrick has a lot of predictive programming for right now, for 9/11, for 2020, and for the advent of the iPhone, the smartphone, the ubiquitous black cube, the black monolith, the slate, the monolithic worldview as censored and curated by your handheld devices' controllers. So we've been talking about Space Odyssey for some time and how that movie tells the story of man entering the space age, and the symbol of the sun and the moon and the eclipse over the monolith. I think this represents the solar and the lunar, represent the news and the fiction, the dreams and reality merging into one, which is what we have seen with the PSYOP entertainment complex for decade after decade since. That's been its primary purpose. So this Odyssey thing is significant for that reason. But when these two astronauts, the ones who are stranded, went up to space, they went in the Calypso. And at the time, before it even launched, I was predicting here there's going to be an incident with this whole launch because it's a Boeing thing. And there was all kinds of talk ever since Leave the World Behind about Boeing and Boeing disasters and Boeing plane parts falling from the sky, Boeing tail cone falling into a parking lot of a Catholic school. Everything was Boeing. And then I watch Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum. Channing Tatum, by the way, says F you flat earthers. He was pretty crude about it. He has no patience. Channing Tatum. So he's in this movie, Fly Me to the Moon. He has a message for all flat earthers. I'm going to play this. And in the movie, they reference fiery disasters and Boeing in the same sentence several times. So you've got Fly Me to the Moon, Boeing disasters. So before this thing even launched, I said there's going to be a disaster. Well, what do you know? The Calypso keeps them stranded. And Calypso is the name of the nymph who keeps Odysseus stranded.
What?
So here you have the astronauts stranded, Calypso, they're on their space odyssey. So now we're kind of wondering, well, what's next? And as we're looking at this developing story, after Odysseus escapes the island, he confronts the Cyclops. He blinds the Cyclops. The Cyclops has its eye impaled on a stick. And then he prays, he appeals to his father Poseidon for revenge. So Poseidon has some connotations here because of the Kraken, Godzilla, metaphor for the nuke, beast from the sea, hunt for Red October, a ton of symbolism for Seattle getting nuked. Combined with this, I would say even James Cameron's work with the Challenger in the Abyss on 9/11 and the significance of that to the idea of the waterborne Poseidon nuclear torpedo that could take out a coastal town. So there's that. But then, so the Space Odyssey, there's kind of a story here. Then we find out that Christopher Nolan, who did, Oppenheimer, the nuke, is now working on what? The Odyssey. Matt Damon's in it. Don't know if that means anything. But the big picture here is there's a metascript significance to the theme in the Odyssey, and it's playing out right now in space. But let me go ahead and play this clip. What is the GOAT conspiracy theory? And this
conspiracy theory.
Flat Earth. I mean, it's like, what? The
Flat
Have you ever been on a plane?
Flat Earth is wild.
What is going on, guys?
Flat Earth is wild.
So stupid. I'm sorry. For you flat earthers out there, go f yourself.
Okay. Now, I don't know why it's uniquely reviled. If you look at the stuff that normies believe, but whatever. You shouldn't even believe the earth is flat any more than you should believe it's whatever. You should know. And if you know something, how do you know? Have you even asked yourself, well, how do I know this is true? Well, easy. We know man went to the moon because the astronauts gave moon rocks to the government of Holland. Oh, wait, those moon rocks were all petrified wood. We know they went to the moon because I saw it on TV. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't broadcast live. Okay, phones are open. I think someone's just calling in. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey Tim, it's Leo Pirate.
Hey, what's up? What top?
I just saw.
Yeah,
I just saw the Channing Tatum clip. It's funny. I think the reason why they're so dismissive and there's so much mockery and hatred around even just the notion of it is because of how it's the idea attacks so many apocalypse scenarios. The asteroid. Like same thing with the people who question nukes. I remember when Oppenheimer had come out, all over Twitter, X at the time, people were saying, there are people who don't think nukes are real? What? Whoa.
Yeah, exactly. People were blown away by it. And I say this as a former NBC NCO. I held that slot, and NBC is all about nukes, fallout, and unit readiness in case somebody gets nuked nearby and you got to deal with fallout and plot its course and prepare for EMP. And yeah, looking back, yeah, I totally disbelieve in nukes. I think it's a God construct, 100%. And it's a war God. It's a doomsday scenario that atheists believe in. And that's the main thing. This new paradigm has to terrorize atheists the way that religions can terrorize believers. Because this is, in fact, a de facto religion, but it's just dressed up in a certain way.
Well, I mean, for me, what confuses me is like, even if I totally believed in the nuke, and I hear someone they don't believe in nukes, you might have that knee-jerk reaction, but after a while, don't you start to go, why would they question the right? Like, what led them to that conclusion, right? And no one ever does that. Instead, like the Channing Tatum clip, it's just like, flat Earth is wild, right? Not believing this is crazy. Whoa, like, oh yeah. Anyway, like just moving on, like pretending it never happened. Like just that hand wave dismiss, right?
Yeah, it's certainly true. There is this hand wave dismissal. There's a false sense of superiority that they have in their views. And as I said before, when it comes to the McToon, Patrick Duffy, or Jaron, I don't care about their opinions because they believe the fake news. And if they believe the fake news is real, then what do I care about their big picture perspectives? Because, as I said earlier, I don't think the ball constitutes a complete model until we can discern what's behind space fakery. Space being fake changes everything.
Well, the thing is, also earlier you were talking about like 33-year-olds. I think it's very concerning that there's a new Timothy McVeigh film coming out, right? Especially since he was executed on 6/11, 33 years old. David Crash, 33 years old. And, the thing is, kind of like how you just coined the term meta script, I always have been fascinated in the world religions, like all of them, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Quran to the Bible to especially in America. America has a wealth of these strange Christian offshoots, and I'm always fascinated in them. And what I found is in the Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and the Catholics, what they all do, what's characteristic, is they take one part of the Bible and completely divorce it from its context and form a whole unique doctrine around it. So the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't celebrate their birthday. The reason for this is no one in the Bible is seen celebrating the birthday of Jesus, the apostles, none of them, except for two characters, two evil men, the Pharaoh in Joseph's day, and King Herod, who had, John the Baptist beheaded. And on their birthdays, the only two birthdays celebrated in the Bible, they had a man executed. The Pharaoh in Joseph's day, he had the butler hung, and then in King Herod's day, he had John the Baptist beheaded on his birthday. And they say, you see, the only people who celebrate their birthdays are evil men in the Bible, so we don't celebrate birthdays. But in context, if you look at it, there is a much greater, deeper typological significance to those scenes, right? Mormons, they take one verse from the Apostle Paul where it says, we baptize in the name of, for the dead, for who will suffer the baptism for the dead. That's why they do retroactive baptisms for the dead. But if you just read one or two verses above, it has nothing to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like an odd thing to say that they didn't do this in the Bible, therefore. They didn't have tea time in the Bible. So are we supposed to say it's unbiblical? Like, you can't, the Bible was not a complete model because it was maybe up to that point. But, I mean, if you take the Bible, maybe it describes the world at a certain point. But no, it does not prescribe a perfect way of life for all time. It's kind of absurd to say that we should judge everything by the standard. It's a closed system if you use it like that. And when I say the Earth question should be open system versus closed system, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is it a closed system that presupposes that it has all the answers, or is it open to new information?
Yeah, and it certainly, you'd be, like so many others throughout history, it'd be abusing the Bible to say like, if it doesn't, I think, who was the person who was a biblical flat earther? I hate the biblical flat earth stuff. Total nonsense. I mean,
Philip Stalling.
In the Final Experiment was a pastor.
Yeah, Philip Stalling. No, I mean, Patrick Fuddy, Pastor Fuddy.
I think I like how in South Pole you had him just be like the devil and be like it'd be either or. Like either the Earth is a ball and Satan is right, or the Bible. And it's like, oh my God, it is really sad how it's reduced in that way. But in the same way, all these cults or different views, they take one part of the Bible and view it. Occultists tend to do that. They always take one thing out of the Bible. Even Bible flat earthers, by the way, they take parts of the Bible and say, "Oh, you see, this is proof that the Bible's flat," when that's not even the focus or the emphasis of the entire passage. There's this unique idea that Jesus was crucified when he was 33 years old. Um, that's not the case according to anything in the Bible. In fact, from the Old Testament prophecies to the Gospels to the epistles, there's no mention of the age of the Son of God when he suffered on the cross. So I was like, well, why do people make such a big deal about Jesus being right? Not, I shouldn't say people, occultists in particular. Why do they make such a big deal about the 33? Right? It's in their psyops. All of it. What is it? The Freemasonry has an honorary 33rd degree. They claim it's from the 33 vertebrae in the human spine. Like there's just 33 is everywhere, right? Half of 66 too, by the way. So, what I'd always found out is that, yeah, it's never, Jesus' age is not mentioned in the Bible, but you can derive, if you really read between the lines, that Jesus was baptized when he was 30 years old, and his ministry is 3.5 years, measured by the number of Passovers recorded in the gospel. But there's a problem, Tim. It's like, what happens if Jesus, when he was baptized, is about 30 years old?
Well, I think it's
What if he
lore.
was baptized when he was three?
It's like for example, America founded 1776, but according to the Masonic calendar, which begins Anno Lucius, year of light, you add 4,000 years, it would have been 5776, which happens to be the height of the pyramid represented on the bill, the Great Pyramid, in inches. But they correlate this also with 1776 AL, which is the year, according to this lore, after the flood. They calculate it in some way. They say this is when the Tower of Babel's construction began. So you can find this correlation between the beginning of the construction of the Tower of Babel, America, the Great Pyramid, and the One World Trade Tower, which looks like a pyramid with a capstone when you look at it from up close, and it's 1776 feet high. So it seems like there's some lore that takes precedent over what might be actual fact. Like, was Martin Luther really 33 when he nailed the theses to the door? I don't know. But that's kind of the lore. That's what goes into it. And these stories are consistent. Dave Koresh thought he was Jesus. His followers thought he was Jesus. He said his death, he would come back and they would fight the apocalypse with these like super bodies that would be brought back to life with more power. And anyway, he was 33. So this is like a common theme. So then for McVeigh, who was radicalized at the Branch Davidian compound to die at 33, also has some obvious implications here, because he's kind of like this martyr for this group. So it ties into this martyr theme in a lot of ways. But yeah, it doesn't have to be true for them to use it like it's true. It's like this lore, this framework that they impose.
Yeah, and it's like what it is I think the numbers are like the I would say spider webs of lies, how they link together on the if you imagine the world stage audience as a mass mind, the subconscious of it is in numbers. And by decorating history, events, faked events, completely faked events, real events that occurred, fake events, right, with this numerology, whether you believe it's real or not, subconsciously it's always associated. So I think that it's not a mistake. It's like I used to think that they were just joking around, like a little inside joke, or maybe even you suggest the idea it's intercommunication, right? Certainly that could be a part of it, but I really think there is some kind of subconscious mesmerism involved in always seeing these numbers, so that you always associate some kind of savior or some kind of fraudster or someone that was hated, loved with 33. Right? Timothy McVeigh certainly wasn't loved, but by some far right-wing people he was.
The QAnon Strong, yeah,
thing, right?
There is something here. Like the major instigators. And so one of the meanings I've derived from it is from the 33rd degree order out of chaos, meaning every time they create chaos in order to advance increased amounts of order and they reframe things, that number is consistently applied. So there's further meaning to be derived from this if you look at the symbol of the phoenix and how the phoenix symbol relates to the symbol of the Burning Man, and how, like I talked about earlier, the 33-year-old Burning Man on the ellipse, 33 years later, another Burning Man on the ellipse, that every year at the ellipse, at the what they call Catharsis at the Mall. They do a Burning Man festival. There were 33 consecutive Burning Man festivals, Black Rock City, Nevada. And then they had to break for a year because of COVID. So what is the correlation here, I think, has to do with the idea of, and it's esoteric, there's many meanings. I think it's state change, ascension, like, for example, and without going into too many rabbit trails here trying to determine what it means, I think it can be said that the number 33 has a meaning of the phoenix and revolution. Revolution specifically.
Order out of chaos. Yeah.
Burn down, build back later. Yeah.
Build back better. Right? So it's like destruction and then build back better. And that 33 is significant because the Trinity, the first was a nuclear test site in New Mexico, right? Was called the Trinity test site. Also, Oppenheimer brought that back to our memory with in the film. So this is significant. 33, Trinity, all of these things. But what I discovered in my own research is that there's compelling evidence. I don't know if anyone here is aware, but the Gregorian calendar was created like 1,500 years after Christ, and it was designed by a Jesuit mathematician. And if you follow, because the calendar system didn't exist in the days of that are purported in the Bible. If you work backward using the constellations described in Revelation chapter 12 and the Levitical priest and the feasthoods and stuff, you can find, and this has been proposed since the 1970s, that the actual birth of Jesus was September 11th, 3 BC. And it's like, that's, whoa, a little bit strange. And if you know that to be the actual birth of Jesus and count the Passovers, the Son of God, Jesus was actually crucified when he was 34 years old.
Wait,
So
let me ask this.
4 equals 7.
Wasn't Neo born on 9/11?
That was when his passport was expired, right?
Oh wait, that's right. His birth date was 3/11, and his passport expired 9/11. Somebody here says 33 degrees is one above freezing. Yeah, I also look at it like this. When it comes to the significance of transcendence, is like you have an ice cube symbolizing the material, and then 33 is the temperature where it begins to melt. It breaks to that form. So it's like transcendence of this realm. And if you look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, they have the black, the kingdom is associated with black, and at the top is the light, and it has this map of the soul's ascension. And many correlate this with the idea of the Kundalini, the spine, and all this stuff. So you have this new age version of Christ that represents the person transcending the material realm. But it's extra biblical, and I think you make that point pretty well.
Yeah, and it's so yes, the world stage Jesus was crucified at 33 years old, but the biblical Jesus was not. And this is studying the differences, like when we do predictive programming analysis or media analysis, when our metascriptors adopt books or films, we like to see, well, why did they change it? And the release date of the film, what did they change from the original source material to make it syncretize with the current cultural moment in time, right? And the 33 Jesus, if you will, the world stage Jesus, being tied to the Phoenix or destruction and resurrection, the Trinity site being where the first nuke is. In the Vatican, behind the Pope, there's the statue of Fazzini, which was made in the 70s, where it has a nuclear cloud, Jesus arising out of a nuclear crater. That's seated behind the Pope. Very strange. Like, I do wonder if the fake nuke that we might see in the future could be the catalyst to consolidate all of the different denominations in America, to syncretize them to like this ultimate, if you will, world stage Jesus that's coming about. That's just a theory. I don't have a lot of evidence behind it, but Trump is certainly, there's 33s around him. So wasn't he convicted guilty of 34? He's convicted of 34.
Look, in my opinion, I think because of our think tank that we have seen some world script rewrites, I think they've bumped some 42s to 43 and some 33s to 34. I said 34 is the new 33, and I think they have done this deliberately. Hey, I got a pop quiz for you. In the 2023 film Oppenheimer, there was a plot device where Los Alamos scientists gradually added marbles into a fishbowl, and these represented uranium and plutonium. Now, how many pounds of marbles did they need in order to complete it?
33, I think.
That's correct. In the middle of the movie, this plot device here, the scientists had to put 33 pounds of marbles into the fishbowl.
Yeah, and it's just it's almost like one of those in a bingo card, like a bingo free spot. When you see 33, 33, and stuff in any of these news events, you can even, well, by the way, the age of that late December, there was a story of I think a South American immigrant, a Mexican immigrant who had burned a woman to death, like set her on fire. How old do you think that man was?
Oh God.
Who had
Yeah.
done that?
They should have
Who did that crime?
quarantined him for his 33rd year.
Always quarantine with 33-year-olds, right? And it's always, it's not like everyone's always reading between the lines, but these headlines are flashing across everyone. And I think what our metascripters, when they're working on these things, they consider the mass mind, like the entire world stage audience as one big brain. They
Yes.
won't get everyone all the time, but it's still these impressions are being made always. And no one consciously looks at the age of these perpetrators, right? Like the think tank does, where people are, what's it called, completely just disseminating all these, staged fake events. It's like you can look at it, but most people, if you don't know that it's staged, you won't even bother looking for numerological symbolism or for themes and things like this.
And let's add this too. Our awareness is a matter of filtering out. So your ego, your perception, everything has to be ordered. And in order for this to be ordered, there has to be a lot of filtration because we get so much information every single second that if we processed all of it, it would be like being high on acid. So we have to have a narrowing. So our consciousness is mostly a filter, but all that peripheral information that we don't notice is still being noticed. It's just not being noticed by you. It's being noticed by your, I'd just say your wider peripheral awareness, and your subconscious takes it all in. So it's all there. It's all programming. All the entertainment is programming, whether you're half-assed paying attention or you're fully engrossed. And so we watch with that awareness in mind. And I got another pop quiz for you. So the brother of Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan, did Fallout, which is about what happens after the nuke. What vault was the protagonist from in Fallout?
Vault 33. Of course.
Yeah. And isn't it wild? It's like the same family, these individuals, they're in these movies that are doing like parallel predictive programming narratives, and even the symbolism lines up consistently.
Yeah, and I think, what is his name? Michael Aquino, in the book Mind War, he had talked about how the secret for, he uses actually The Magician. He has a chapter on magic. And he talks about, like, if you were a magician, you want him to do a good show, you must have 100% complete control of the stage and the environment where your trick is occurring, but you don't need to make that obvious. In fact, you shouldn't make that obvious to your audience. So, and the analogy then to the Psy War, Mind War, of trying to stage these things, it's beneficial to think that Hollywood is separate from the news, that don't bother looking into both of the Nolans making shows and movies related to the nuke, and whatever. Don't think about these recurring numbers of, Mel Gibson, for example, in The Patriot, right? Was it 9 and 11, that rocker he was sitting on? That still blows my mind. That's crazy.
Yeah. Mel Gibson, a year before 9/11, he's a patriot building a rocking chair. He's like a veteran, and he's like 9 pounds, 11 ounces. That's perfect. He sits on it, and everybody looks at him like they're scared. The camera focuses in on the rear of the chair. You see the two legs, and then it collapses. And then his farmland gets invaded, and he has to go to war. The Patriot, Mel Gibson, conspiracy theory guy, big in Q lore as one of theirs. And then his more recent movie, Flight Risk, had a lot of predictive programming for all the plane crashes that we saw right after that one came out. And then he goes on to Joe Rogan's show as his house is burning, which ties into the LA fires, which were compared to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and delayed the production of Fallout Season 2. So Gibson, again, yeah, the fact that he's part of 9/11 predictive programming tells you he's a world stager. He's in on it.
Yeah, he's a world stager who's trained by the best, because we talked previously about Jesuit theater. He's an honorary graduate of Marymount Loyola Jesuit University. There's a picture of him and stuff. Of course, just because, why not? AutoSat in the chat said something fascinating. It's data compression for the mind, a way of bottlenecking huge chunks of information and filtering it into the most important parts. Absolutely. I mean, in machine learning, that's how it's done. You get a compressed version, an encoded version of data, and then you encode and decode it. But the encoded version is still used. So, yeah, it's like, again, even if it doesn't code your conscious mind, all of these little instances Tim and I are talking about, like they're still impressed on the world stage audience to add plausibility, to add legitimacy to a faked event where people will be arguing about why it happened, who did it, never about whether or not it actually occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. And the theory behind chaos magic and sigil magic, as I think it was Austin Osman Spare came up with this. The idea was that you could take a sentence, and this is all done, of course, in the context of the idea of magic. But you take a sentence of what you want, an expression of your will or your desire, and you take those letters and you mash them up into a symbol where someone looking at it wouldn't be able to discern it. But the theory here is that if you can bypass your conscious interpretation of it, it still gets absorbed into the subconscious where greater levels of, mental resources can be employed toward achieving and influencing that end. So sigil magic is based on the idea that our subconscious mind is something of a supercomputer that can be tapped into, but that it's not directly under our control. You almost got to trick your ego into ceding control in order for it to work. But it's an interesting idea here. The idea here, of course, that we're highly susceptible to all the information around us, even if we don't know it. Mind viruses, kind of.
For sure. The one thing I was going to say before I go is that, like, I think the biggest draw that I came to this think tank was when I saw the Machete clip and the connection to 713. The biggest contribution I think I've ever gotten from you, Tim, is that predictive programming points to fake events. So sigil magic, compressing information and stuff, these things are used to add plausibility. It's like the most subtle form of lying. Like, because, when someone thinks, for example, like the ninth commandment, don't bear false witness, you probably think of telling someone something's false, like a lie. Like, I was there yesterday, right? No, the way Satan lies, or the way occultists lie, or the way these people, the most advanced liars, they would have deep fake photos of them at a place. They would have suggestions. They would have other fake witnesses saying, of course he was there and stuff. It's far beyond them just saying, of course I was at the party yesterday. They would go way beyond, attack the subconscious. They have false witnesses, deep fake photos. In fact, you would get to the point where you would never even ask if they were at the place at the time. It would just be an assumed reality.
This false witness thing is interesting. I remember when Google Maps had shown how North Korea was in darkness and South Korea was lit. And this headline went around, this phrase went around. It was like, Google Maps has made witnesses of us all. So Google Maps has made witnesses of us all to this injustice, this state of, poverty that they were forced into. But now we're all witnesses to it. But the truth of it is, the news media has made false witnesses of us all. And I wonder what that means in terms of the implications for that particular commandment, if just by indoctrination and conditioning, you become a bearer of false witness and you defend it. And that's where I call this the lie world order, and I say there's no honesty or there's no truth in it, because the honest people are co-opted and made into bearers of false witness and media advocates.
For sure. The thing I always say, this aphorism, is a half-truth is a full lie. A half-truth is a full lie. That is all you need to know. Like that, that's really the implications of it. Because sure, maybe the physical locations where a faked event occurs exists. Sure, maybe there were a couple of marks in the audience, like we saw in Vegas, right? That still doesn't. It's still a complete lie, right? The full lie. It doesn't matter, right? That there's some things that are a part of it that might be real, right? So yeah, just a half truth is a full lie, and yeah, again, the commandments themselves, they're so archaic. Like the fourth commandment, don't have like keep your sheep inside and don't have servants working on the Sabbath. Like that's not. There's so much more to it. It's not a bunch of rules. It's the spiritual implications of it. And false witness. You can bear false witness with a facial expression, with a tone of your voice, with what you don't say. But if you read it very literally, if you're a Bible literalist and just take it as is, then you turn into a Pharisee and you start turning into like, well, I didn't say this. right? It was up to you to infer and stuff. And sure, I was smiling while saying it. So yeah, you get what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely. And I think this is all interesting stuff to talk about. I'm very interested in really going into the weeds with lies and the various categories of lies and um, how much you can, I guess, claim plausible deniability. Or are we a society of liars and who's responsible for fixing that? I think these are all valid points. And I agree we shouldn't bear false witness. And I think that we should reach for some level of objectivity and we should hold to it just as a matter of principle. But no, that's not how things are. And the fact that that's in the commandments just points to how intrinsic of a problem and issue this has always been.
Yeah, and it's the Ten Commandments are split up, like, and a bunch of don'ts. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do that. But Jesus, when he came, he affirmed them, saying, "Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself." The first four are about how to love God, and the last six are about loving your neighbor as yourself. So it's quite really, if you love someone, you wouldn't be lying to them, and that's why I think you've talked about on the show before. It's like, are our meta scriptures benevolent? Like, are they even actually bad? Like, of course they are. You can't mix in lies to achieve something good. The ends do not justify the means. This idea that even if the ultimate reality that they're working towards, the ultimate final kingdom, is actually quite comfortable and good, it can't be built upon lies, right?
That's a good
I
point.
don't care how comfortable it is. It's
That's a good point. And we also have to keep in mind that the PSYOP entertainment complex, that the operations they roll out, these do constitute psychological abuse, emotional manipulation. And that's a form of control that is subtle and it's more effective and economical than physical violence. But it actually works to establish the same dynamic. And this is why I say that we have the moral high ground. If somebody says, "How dare you say nobody died?" I'm like, "How dare you bear false witness to terrorize people with lies about people dying that you can't even verify?" So, from that point of view, I think that
yeah, and it should be good news, right? The stuff you tell, it should be good news, saying like, yeah, that event, no one died, no one cried. It should be a good thing. You don't need to be so invested in hanging on every word Trump and Zelensky say while they're sitting on a couch or something. You don't. This should be good news, but people are so, I would say, bound spiritually, like these spiritual ropes that's tied them into the system.
yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, great call and great points that you raised here. And yeah, we do have to take this the symbolism stuff. We have to look at it objectively as we can, and that's why I make a study of it. And I'm looking at these patterns, but they are not bound to
For sure.
truth when they
Thanks,
write these
Tim.
stories.
All right, bye.
All right, see ya. So we were making this distinction between this New Age Christ figure of transcendence and the biblical concept and how they're somewhat they're fundamentally different, coming from two different worldviews. But the concept of the phoenix also implies reincarnation. Joe Saunter says, "Are they trying to do Wall-E? What is going on? Are they pretending they ruined the planet?" Oh yeah, they're pretending. And Wall-E has Otto. Otto is like HAL 9000 in control of the ship. So one interpretation of Wall-E is that you're actually looking at the Noah's flood myth, the flood. And during the flood, Noah and the chosen go into the ark until the waters recede. And how do they know that it's possible to go back to land? Well, a dove. A dove goes and grabs an olive branch, and so the olive branch being a symbol of peace. Well, this is now showing that the floods have been retracted. So the dove brings the branch back. I think there was also a raven in the story, but anyway, I was actually listening to a podcast this morning about the Epic of Gilgamesh, which could be the basis for Noah's flood. But anyway, so here's a new iteration of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Noah's flood, Wall-E. The story is Earth is uninhabitable, and the government has declared Directive 113. Directive 113 means that we have to exit, abandon ship. So the human beings go onto a big spaceship, which is like Noah's Ark, but it's Noah's Ark in space. And notice the correlation between the waters and space. stranded in space. In the movie Breathe, they're stranded underwater. There's a lot of connections here. The idea of aliens above, aliens below. But Wall-E has a space arc. And so they're in space while the robot, Wall-E, is on Earth cleaning up our trash. And one day he finds he's maintaining a plant. So the plant is evidence that life can now resume on Earth. But from the ark, they send down this little robot, this little white robot here. It looks like a dove. And her job is to take this plant and bring it back up to the captain so they can see it's time to go back to the Earth. So this is kind of there's a Noah's Ark. The wickedness in this movie isn't sin, but it's our carbon footprint. It's our pollution. It's capitalism. And the movie creates a great deal of sympathy for the robots. They're great. They're morally pure. And the human beings are decadent, morbidly obese, on recliners, looking at screens and slurping protein shakes all day. They don't get up. They don't even do anything for themselves. And in the way it's portrayed on the ship, it's also Marxist class warfare stuff because they represent the elite and the robots are the poor. The robots are slaves. The robots have no rights. So now these humans, having been acclimated to this new system where they don't have to do anything, they just sit back and eat and watch TV and the robots serve all their needs, they have no reason to move. Their muscles atrophy and they balloon up in size. And of course, 0G, it doesn't matter. So at the end of the movie, they come back down to the Earth and they step out of the ship. And Otto was trying to control them. There's some dark implications for Otto, like this HAL 9000 like robot that controls everything. When the president says it's time to abandon the Earth, Directive 113, he puts on a gas mask. All kinds of 311 connections. And in some of the imagery, you can even see what appears to be a 311 encoded into the name Wall-E. I think you have to look at it upside down. But Pixar is known for using the number 113 in many of their movies. This is the first movie where they defined it pretty openly. So they go back down to the Earth and they can barely walk. So what they start doing is they decide we're going to abandon our technology and we're going to farm the land. So it goes from capitalism destroys the world to agrarian communist revolution, where they're no longer going to enslave the robots and they're going to till the land with themselves. They're going to abandon the easy life because it destroyed them and it destroyed the planet. So Wall-E is a movie that both appropriates Old Testament mythology with the neo-eschatology of climate change, climate Armageddon, with the critique, the Marxist critique of the West. Then it has the fall of the West, the fall of the world as a result of it, and then the rebuilding on this new basis that there's not going to be an underclass. So, again, Disney brainwashing. And there's some other stuff in there that shouldn't even be there for children. If you watch the scene where Wall-E's in space with Eve and he's got a fire extinguisher, there's some imagery in there that ties into, I believe, the whole mystery school fertility cult symbolism well, I think there's something in there that's on the esoteric side. Thrustazar says, Gil said the sun went through an underground tunnel before returning every day. He was not into the ball earth theory. Well, ball earth theory is only part of it because the flat versus ball thing, it also has to do with is there up and down and are we moving or is it stationary? And I can't even start with the shape because people say if it's a flat earth, what's at the edge? It's like, well, no. If it's not a ball, then you don't start with the presumption of an edge because without the ball presumption, you have no reason to think that space is beneath you, that it's only up. But if there is a ball earth and we're in space in the way described, there is no up and down. These are relative terms. All right, let's continue. The whole movie Wall-E is worth looking at. There's quite a lot to pick apart, multiple subtexts. Again, Noah's Ark, communism, potential cannibalism. The Space Odyssey stuff is interesting. The 113 stuff, that's pretty big. Okay, we talked about Oppenheimer, 33rd Parallel, the Nolans, 33 pounds of marbles. Somebody talked about nuking the moon. Project A119. Top secret plan, 1958 by the Air Force. The aim was to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon to answer mysteries in planetary astronomy and astrogeology. Yeah, no better way to learn about something than to blow it up. The project was not carried out because the risks outweighed the benefits, you think? And they said the moon landing would undoubtedly be a more popular achievement. So this was to beat the Russians in the space race. It didn't actually happen. The explosion was going to happen on the moon's terminator. Now, here's a little bit of symbolism. We're talking about symbolism a lot today, and James Cameron and his role in the Metascripts. As I mentioned before, James Cameron was filming Terminator 2 about the evil cop beating people up and stuff, when George Holliday, who was filming it from the side, just some random guy at the camera, he's recording this, and he's walking home, and he sees the Rodney King beating, which he records for 1 minute, 19 seconds, 33 hits with the baton, and that starts the riots. But the Terminator evil cop theme was just kind of like reflected right there in what he recorded. But the Terminator line, the Terminator is where the night becomes day. It's that line dividing the two. And it's interesting because in the myth of Osiris, and we've been talking about the obelisk, the symbol of the dead sun god, sun king, he is killed symbolically by the night, by the Prince of Darkness, Set. Whoever kills him in these various versions of it, the sunset actually represents the dismemberment of the sun god. So the Terminator line is the point where he dies. So the Terminator has some significance here because in the Terminator movie, the savior of mankind is JC, John Connor, like Jesus Christ, JC. And so who's JC's enemy? Saturn.
Thank you for feeding the Kraken, Diana South. The IPS thanks you for your support and participation. Long live SP.
Yes, long live South Pole. Thank you for that. And yes, South Pole is in production. I have a series plan, a season planned, season 4, and each episode's going to build on the previous ones. So if somebody becomes a character in one episode, they're likely going to come back. All right, let's see here. Oh, so anyway, we're talking about nuking the moon. Didn't actually happen. Now, interestingly, you have A11-9 or A119. So Apollo 11, and then what is 119? And I talked about Jeff Bezos launching on the anniversary of Apollo 11 at 9:11 a.m. So 9/11 and the reverse 119 actually have a great deal of significance here. When you look at how Bible verses are appropriated for the script. So 9/11 has a relationship to Revelation 9/11, which has to do with the king over the abyss, looking at the devastation. But Genesis 1:19 ties into the fall of the Tower of Babel. And we were talking about Jeff Bezos and the symbolism of the builder of the Tower of Babel. And 9/11, the One World Trade Tower that replaced the falling towers, opened on 113. There's that number again. 13 years after, 1776 feet high, allusion to the Tower of Babel. So 119 has a lot to do with the sky falling. So nuking the moon, for example. Donnie Darko came out on that date. It's the date that the new ISS movie came out, about the ISS in the trailer falling to the earth. I mean, so 119 has been positively correlated with the falling of the Tower of Babel and various ways of telling this story. Same with 9/11. So, and interesting too, 9/11, on that date, James Cameron was filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss. The Challenger, it was his craft. So the Challenger in the Abyss, or Abaddon, or Apollyon, or the Exterminator, the Terminator. There's these various ways of describing this entity associated with this destruction and devastation. So when James Cameron, on 9/11, was in the Challenger at the site of the wrecked Titanic, it was not a coincidence. It was a reference to the abyss because he was filming, quote, Ghosts in the Abyss. So he's at the bottom of the ocean at the scene of the devastated Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic, symbolically, metaphorically, is the sinking of the West. And the Twin Towers reinforce this. So this is just part of a meta-scripted story that's been told most recently in Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up, it's the Earth as Titanic about to be hit by a comet, which is like an iceberg. The face of that movie is Leonardo DiCaprio. So Titanic, Don't Look Up have that connection as well. But the Titanic, again, the Twin Towers, the West, the Tower of Babel, New York is Babylon. These are reoccurring themes. More recently, in Megalopolis, about Megalon or Mogollon, Make Rome Great Again. Francis Ford Coppola said it's about the fall of Rome, the fall of America, and it's going to fall again. That whole movie, too, is about this guy on a tower. So Trump, the tower associated with towers, these are reoccurring themes. The towers, the obelisks, the space needles. Going through some comments. Lots of talk about AI here. AI is a game changer. Again, I'm doing a lot of research on it. And I plan on doing some kind of, I'm not sure if it's going to be a wiki, but we have to do some kind of record of all previous fake news. But it has to be done sort of like a parallel Wikipedia, auto hoaxopedia, but it has to be done. But the manpower involved, the labor involved is why I haven't done it yet. We're talking about examining thousands of news articles and publishing articles about the articles and why we think that they're dubious or fake or fakeable. Now, to make that happen, we either have to outsource it. And when I originally conceived of this, I was planning on hiring people through Fiverr to assist with this work. But the more work I do with various AI applications, the more I realize that this is precisely what it can do, and rapidly. So I'm working on a project here to repurpose an AI chatbot to take old news stories and recontextualize them. So our parallel media has a concurrent, or rather a parallel historic timeline. But in addition to what they're saying, this is why we think it's fake. And I don't think this will take very long, based on my experience with these various applications and what they can do. It's what it should be doing. You know, there are people who will take a picture to a website, is this AI or not? And it'll tell you. Well, if you had a completely objective AI chatbot, it would tell you, yeah, that looks fake as hell. That person's lying. And these are the indicators. Like ask an AI, ask a Grok, how can you tell if somebody is faking when they're crying? So, for example, that's just one example. Let's go ahead and do that, actually. So I believe I have Grok right here. It's that weird Saturn-looking symbol. The Grok symbol looks just like Saturn. Is that supposed to be a G? How can I tell if someone is faking like they are crying? Reverse History said, I chose my domain reversehistory.wiki for the purpose of alternative to Wikipedia. Okay, we could probably work with that. We should talk, because this is doable. One Eye Jack says, will we see Terminator robots within the next 20 years? Certainly. Although, I don't know if they're the most effective things. I understand the fearful presentation of an anthropomorphized robot killing people. Actually, it's probably more effective to just use drones with guns. But yeah, absolutely, we will have Terminator robots. Absolutely. I'm sure we already do. It's just a question of, I guess, mobility. You know, I mean, right now the walking and stuff might be awkward, but it's getting there. It's nowhere near Boston Dynamics presents with their fake videos that everybody thinks are real. But I don't really worry about Terminator robots when we have Terminator humans everywhere. I mean, we do have a bunch of people who are unhinged and dangerous and triggerable. Okay, it says here, detecting whether somebody's faking tears can be tricky. It depends on subtle cues and context. Here are some tips. Look at their eyes. Genuine crying involves redness, slight swelling. There might be dry crying, or if tears seem forced, or if they're squeezing them out. Check to see if the eyes are irritated or if the tears are inconsistent. One thing you'll see with a lot of crisis actors is they'll take their finger and they'll stretch out their eyelid and then snap it back a few times. It looks painful. Facial expressions. Real crying comes with involuntarily facial movements like quivering lips. Fake criers overact, exaggerate sobs or theatrical expressions. Watch for symmetry. Genuine emotion tends to be less posed. Interesting. Right. You know what? I haven't really seen any ugly cry faces. Most crisis actors, to their credit, are usually kind of attractive people, like actors. Body language. Someone genuinely upset might hunch over, cover their face, or fidget nervously. Fake crying might involve performative gestures, wiping non-existent tears or looking around to see if anybody's watching. Real crying messes with speech, shaky voices, uneven breathing, follow the tears. Look for smeared makeup, runny noses, or wet cheeks. It's not foolproof. Some people are great actors, others cry differently depending on personality. Give me more information and I will refine advice. Okay, how about this? How do people in shock? Well, we'll get into this later. This is just the point of bringing this up is how you can apply certain criteria to examining news events and get some AI breakdowns, some insights. Yes, we're going to infect AI with the AutoHoax mind virus. Imagine if you had one that could not be fooled by Final Cut Pro or green screens and applied a rigorous methodology for every news story, every reporter. And then also what I want to do as we go through this, I'll ask them, I'll request that it takes the names of all the different reporters for all the fake events that we discern to be fake or believe to be so, and put them all in a category and see what kind of patterns emerge. What networks are involved with what fakery? What politicians? What sheriffs? What police chiefs? Which police chiefs are involved in multiple psyops? And I think big pictures will emerge. Consider how the chief of police for the Maui psyop, where they pretended like it was direct energy weapons or extreme climate change, erratic weather, when it was likely a closed set in a controlled demolition. But the same police chief presided over the Vegas Harvest Festival. Kevin Mooring says, what happened to the Epstein JFK files, or I thought we were going to Fort Knox? Yes, everything that was promised to Trump voters was already promised to them years ago, back in 2015. Whatever happened to save the children? Did you guys stop caring? All those Trump supporters who believed they were saving the children don't care about children anymore. What changed? And they're bringing out all the old stuff. Joe Rogan is talking Pizzagate now. Here's Roseanne Barr. I'm tired of everyone trying to kill us and selling fetus parts to Bill Gates for his fake meat. I'm convinced they aren't human. They're all monsters. So we're back to Hillary Clinton's eating babies. But Hillary Clinton drinking adrenochrome, eating babies was very much in 2015, and they said it's life extension, they're vampires and stuff. And here I am, 2025. None of the people accused of drinking adrenochrome, imbibing any of the stuff, baby's blood, none of them look better. They haven't reversed their aging. If anything, they look worse. So there's Roseanne Barr repackaging a lot of old propaganda. And what is the point of this? There is actually a point. It's beyond just clicks and entertainment. The reason why right-wing conspiracy leans into they are monsters is it's a repackaging of blood libel. And it's not just about anti-Semitism or any of that necessarily. It's about the archaic concepts of evil and sin, demons, Satan versus Jesus, as juxtaposed with the left wing's belief in progressive utopianism, science, the vax, and their disbelief in the traditional religious views. So the idea that everything can be explained in terms of the evil people have been taken over, have taken control. That's why they're explaining it this way. That's why they use these conspiracy theories to demonize the left. And the demonization is part of reinforcing their traditional worldview with demons and witches and blood-drinking vampires at the top of the pyramid. But the right, is just saturated with this stuff. So this QAnon stuff's never going to go away. The left doesn't believe in this stuff. If it were the truth, it wouldn't be partisan. You'd have some liberals who are like, hey, I'm really sick of these politicians raping and killing kids. You never hear that from the left because they don't believe in it. Okay, we talked about Paul on the ball. Paul on the ball with Robbie Davidson on the ball. And Robbie Davidson, again, he's the guy that did the documentary with Philip Stallings. Just so you know, because I'm just trying to give you context. Imagine making a 6-part documentary with a friend who at the same time is doing some terrible things in his basement. Look at this. Okay, I searched for his name. The first thing I get, the Biblical Flat Earth series. Okay, here we go. Durham Man, 66 counts of exploitation of a minor. Founder of the Biblical Flat Earth Society from North Carolina. And if you look at the Robbie Davidson account, Celebrate Truth, he still endorses this guy. 56 counts. So Celebrate Truth is Robbie Davidson's YouTube channel where he pushed Flat Earth, and he did, in fact, promote this guy. Here it is. Look. This is insane. Robbie Davidson, there's more. I mean, Rob Skiba was hanging out with him. And I'm not trying to say it's guilt by association, but if nothing else, where's your discernment? Where's your discernment? If my friend is a serial killer after a few years and I'm making movies with them, hanging out with them, barbecuing, all this stuff we do with friends, at some point I'm culpable. At some point there's like a lack of plausible deniability. Again, guilt by association, yeah, it's generally kind of fallacious, but no, it's true in this case, I think. Especially when you look at the wider pattern and the other people associated. It's pretty bad. Frazzle Drip is back too. Oh, God. Yeah, Frazzle Drip, Epstein. Epstein's back in South Pole, actually. He didn't really die, but he rented his temple to NASA, and they turned it into a virtual studio where they could fake Antarctica. So if you haven't seen the first episode of South Pole, it does have Epstein as a character. And then beneath the temple, beneath the sex temple, you have the stable where Musk is involved in breeding monstrosities like some kind of Dr. Moreau. Highland Park parade shooter signed, quote, Donald Trump when he waived his right at trial. So this is intriguing. Violet posted this. I'm so glad we got to this one. Robert Crimo. One of my favorite mass shooters from 2022. This is the guy that had 47 tattooed on the side of his head, 47 spray painted on his car. He'd go to Trump rallies. He had a Lee Harvey Oswald newspaper article on his wall. So he's obsessed with Oswald. He's a sniper. He goes to Trump rallies. He's got 47 tattooed on his head where Trump was shot at. And he signed his name, Donald Trump. Interestingly, this was on 4/7. So again, 4/7. I think he killed 7 people. But on July 4th. So 4th of July parade. And then this was the 74th day of the year this is announced. Now, Nick Cruz, the Parkland High shooter, was in the news when the Highland Park shooter did his thing. Interestingly, you've got now connections between the Highland Park shooter and Donald Trump because he goes to Trump rallies. He's obsessed with Oswald. And this is when I said Lee Harvey Oswald had entered the world stage, and we started looking at Trump's hat. And I said, look, where the 47 is, where the 45-47 is, that's where they're going to cap him. So we were talking about the Trump shooting 2 years before based on this character. What's even more interesting to me, Highland Park, Parkland High, Parkland Hospital is where JFK was taken after he was shot. But I brought this up because people are talking about the Ides of Trump, referring to the Ides of March, a reference to Julius Caesar, who was assassinated on 3/15. Now, one thing about the Ides of March and the death of Julius Caesar, what happened on 7/13 was Trump getting shot at, but on that date, the birth of Julius Caesar, that's the date. So 7/13 is Julius Caesar's birth date. So we're like, wait, so he's shot on Julius Caesar's birth date and they miss. What's going to happen on Julius Caesar's death date? The Ides of Trump. So I don't know what the Ides of Trump is, but there is a number of articles about this, and it got me thinking about this connection. And a deeper connection too. Harrison Ford was born on 7/13. And he's the president in Captain America, Brave New World. So he's the president, and he gets shot at the podium. And this trailer aired right before Trump was shot, and Marvel changed it after. So you have another connection because he was born on 7/13. Trump was shot on 7/13. Trump was representing Caesar in the Park, and he was killed on stage. So there's that other Caesar connection. Trump's character in Megalopolis is named Caesar, and he gets shot. So there's just overlapping connections here with Caesar. And the date 7/13 just kind of solidifies it. So this Captain America movie's premiere plays right before Trump is shot. I mean, the trailer. Now, the movie is playing in Liberty Theater. This was last week in Washington, and the theater ceiling collapsed. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So the movie is first showing a trailer, Trump gets shot. Now the entire theater collapses. And in the trailer, the shooting was in a theater, so there's that connection. Harrison Ford, again, born 7/13, made me think Ford Theater, like Abe Lincoln. But the connection here is that the trailer and the movie releases maybe have corresponding events, the shooting and the ceiling collapsing. And now I'm looking at Ides of March. And then add to it, Harrison Ford's character becomes the Red Hulk. How is that not MAGA? How is that not Trump in his final form? And he's opposed by Sidewinder, played by the same actor who plays the enemy of Caesar in Megalopolis, who plays the enemy of the Trump character Homelander in The Boys. So there's a pretty strong pattern that has emerged. So the Ides of Trump, I haven't looked into it too much, other than people are connecting the death of Caesar with the death of, here we go, Trump. We'll see what comes of this, but it's just something that I'm kind of noticing in the big script. The Ides of Trump postcard protest. Ides of Trump protesters, so this is not new. They've done this before. It's when they flooded the White House with a bunch of postcards. But it wouldn't be the first time that Trump is associated with Caesar. Again, if you haven't seen Megalopolis, the character Caesar, this is a layered movie. He definitely represents Trump. Although visually, Jon Voight creates this Trump persona in the movie with a gold statue of himself and a bunch of spoiled kids. And visually, Adam Driver looks like Neo, which is not a coincidence, because they were alluding to the Matrix throughout that movie, as they were also alluding to Dark City. All right, let's see here. Harrison Ford is the owner of the Dodgers in the movie 42. Well, yeah, so Harrison Ford's birthday, 7/13, Trump getting shot that day, the connection with the trailer for that movie. And these are just a few examples of the predictive programming alignments. You had the Batman Caped Crusader, where the character, his name is, I think it's Thorne, Rupert Thorne, has his right ear slashed by Batman as a warning at the end of the season. Thrusters are, Adam Driver, again, he plays Caesar. He looks like Neo from The Matrix. Lawrence Fishburne is his driver in all these Matrix-like scenes, always telling him about the mysteries of time, like Morpheus told Neo about the mysteries of, well, the Matrix or space. So it's all about time and space. There's also some pretty obvious references to Dark City. So it's interesting how Francis Ford Coppola's movie incorporated a couple of other movies into this one. And he actually included footage from 9/11/2001 in Manhattan. And the reason why he delayed the movie by 20 plus years is that it would have been redundant to 9/11. They even pulled entire scenes because it would have been too close to what they saw on 9/11. So yeah, Francis Ford Coppola, another meta-scripter worth studying. But again, a little bit of foreshadowing here. I haven't seen the movie yet. I have to go see it, this Captain America. But the fact that the trailer was associated with predictive programming for the Trump head or concurrent programming, and then they released the movie, has a theater collapse, a Liberty Theater. What is that? So this is from The Economist 2022, Crypto's Downfall. And what does that look like to you? Crypto's Downfall. Well, if you haven't seen these yet, there have been many, many videos of Starship exploding. Here it is over the Ragged Islands, Bahamas. The Starship exploding looks exactly like this Crypto's Downfall. Not sure the significance of it, but The Economist is generally a good indicator of the future. Rocket debris poses risks to aircraft operations. There's a 26% chance every year that an out-of-control rocket will fall through busy airspace. The growing odds of space junk hitting planes. This is from astronomy.com. So that's a thing. Now, speaking of Musk, because Starship exploding, Crypto's downfall, it's all connected to him. Nefarious Filthbird said, I want to stress that Musk is genuinely using his kid as a human shield. He wears a Kevlar vest every time he's in public, and he always makes sure to carry his kid only at his exposed areas, like his head, when he's exiting planes on the tarmac, leaving buildings, or any time that he's exposed. So according to ex-user Sasquatch God, that's his username, Elon Musk is actually just taking his child around as additional protection for his head in case he gets sniped. Deprogrammed Truther says, also tracks with old world myths about stars falling from heaven. You know, in my book Metascript Decoded from 2020, I said that Elon Musk's role here with his dragon will tie into this. Because I had pointed out then that it has the verse where the dragon's tail pulls down 33% of the stars, a third of the stars. And I thought, well, what would happen if Elon Musk had some kind of an accident that ends up with his dragon rocket, maybe knocks the ISS down, knocks some of his CubeSats, and then 42,000 CubeSats fall into Earth? It would look like stars falling. It would look like the sky falling. So in that, I had put down that maybe Musk's role would be the takedown of the ISS and the low Earth orbit infrastructure. I had already posted that years ago. So here we're seeing this kind of coming into fruition. And in fact, Elon Musk is being contracted to take down the ISS. So that's literally going to happen. Breaking, Alex Jones wrote this. President Trump stated his assassination files will be handed to him next week, and he believes they'll be released to the American people. He noticed strange data points on the assassins and the lack of action from the FBI to investigate these sinister events. Okay, he's going to get to the bottom of it, sure. Now, does Alex Jones believe this? Does he not know about the Heinz 57 trick? The squib in the hat? More here. The astronauts were only supposed to be in space for 8 days, and they've been up there for 8 months, said Elon Musk. SpaceX could have sent up another Dragon 6 months ago, but NASA did not allow it. For political reasons, they didn't want to give Elon Musk the victory of rescuing the 2 astronauts. That's what he is positing here. Trump says, maybe these two astronauts stuck up there will love each other. I don't know. This is our comedian in chief. He's actually pretty good sometimes. He says, think of it. And the woman with the wild hair, what a solid head of hair. There's no games with her hair. Let's listen to Trump talk about the astronaut's hair and how these two, in his mind, in some kind of fan fiction-y way, might fall in love. Is that what he's suggesting? That Sonny and Butch are perhaps in love with each other?
Won't let it happen. We're going to get them out. We're coming up to get you. I've authorized Elon. I said, can you get them out? Because, you know, they've been left up there. I hope they like each other. But they've been, maybe they'll love each other. I don't know. But they've been left up there. Think of it. And I see the woman with the wild hair, good solid head of hair she's got. There's no kidding. There's no games with her hair. But, and you know, there's a danger up there, too. It can have some failures up there that would be very bad. You got to get them out. So I've authorized Elon a week ago. I said, you know, we have two people up there that Biden and Kamala left up there, and he knows it very well. I said, are you equipped to get him? He said, yeah, he's got a Starship, and they're preparing it right now. And so Elon is going to go up and...
There you have it. There's Trump commenting on her hair, and hopefully they fall in love. I don't know what he's talking about. Let's see here. Luigi Mangione recorded 50 sex tapes, and he wants people to see them. Check the browser history of your liberal or leftist spouse. The internet is in meltdown mode after bombshell rumors surfaced that Luigi Mangione kept a stash of high production value sex tapes. He has become a, quote, thirst trap icon. The claims were reported on Radar. Apparently it's, quote, cinema level quality with perfect lighting. So there's that. Now, you know, I was critical of Luigi worshippers, and they're like, oh, you're just jealous. And it's like, well, that's not the case. Like, I don't want that attention. I don't want people who are attracted to murderers. I mean, these are the same people who would be fawning over Ted Bundy if he was doing it today. Hey, do you all remember this person, Amber Rose? Amber Rose was a guest speaker at the RNC after Trump was shot. She has the tattoo on her forehead. I think she was dating the rapper Horatio Blow. We don't hear from him much anymore. He's a MAGA rapper. So she's associated with MAGA. But anyway, she made this statement about Puff Daddy, or Diddy. And what Amber Rose said is that she went to every single white party.
Everyone. I've been to every Puff party. I've been to every white party since 2009. I've been to every party, and
you go in the right room, not the wrong room.
I don't think there's rooms, Chad. I'm gonna be honest. Now look, I'm gonna be very, very transparent on the show. If these freak offs are happening, it's on a completely different day than the actual Puff parties.
Day, okay.
So there we have it. She's suggesting that these things aren't even real. I'm kind of with that. Much more to talk about. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Thanks for the calls. Thanks for the comments. We'll go back and work on South Pole. Thank you all for the support. Appreciate it very much. You're enabling all of this. And this is Chief Crow, Auto Hoax. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
I'm on Auto Hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time. Crisis actor with soulless eyes.
My buddy, my buddy and me.
Telecommunications Act of 1996. Gonna filter your eyes and scrub your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'ma be an auto hoax, and it feels so good. You just ought to believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time.